Okay, welcome to this webinar. This particular webinar, I think, is probably one of the most important webinars you could ever be on, even if you're a law student or you're a practicing attorney in whatever really state you are in your career. Understanding the information I'm going to talk about today is incredibly important. It's more important than where you went to law school. It's more important than the quality of firm you're working at. It's more important than the practice area you're in. It's really the most important possible topic that you could be exposed to. And I really mean that, because once you get business as an attorney, everything changes. You have freedom. You're not as accountable to others, even in a large firm. You have the freedom to work in different types of environments, different firms. You get so much power, and you actually take control of your life and your career once you get business. And attorneys without business, when they get several years into practice, are really under the control of others. And then you can lose jobs. You have to impress others. There's all these things that happen to you when you don't have business. And so this is really the way to freedom. It's the way to make the most money practicing law. Attorneys that have a lot of business are the ones that get paid the most. The attorneys that have a lot of business are the ones that you read about in the news. Attorneys that have a lot of business are the ones that eventually go into important roles, whether it's in government or in-house. So having business is beyond important. It's really there's nothing that I think that's more important for an attorney if you want to build your career to learn how to do this. And what I want to say to you at the outset, too, that's very important, is it doesn't matter what your practice area is. You could be a personal injury attorney with a lot of business. That's why personal injury attorneys are advertised on billboards, everything. We're trying to get business, or on buses and television. You could be a Social Security attorney and have a lot of business. I've known some very successful people doing that, or immigration, or any insurance defense. It doesn't matter. But this is really the key to the legal profession and doing well. And the people that do the best are almost always, without exception, the people that have a lot of business. And so this is it's a mindset that you're going to learn today. It's ways to get business. I'm going to talk about the importance of business, and really just to start off, how incredibly important this is, and how it doesn't matter who you are or where you went to law school. Anybody can get business. It doesn't matter how outgoing you think you are. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. What's most important is you're able to do it, and being able to get business is something you need to start thinking about probably while you're in law school, and then when you get out of law school, it's something that you need to improve at. I'll tell you just a couple things before I start this webinar. And by the way, this is a live webinar, so I will take as many questions as anyone has at the end of the webinar, and I don't have a time limit to stop. So hopefully, if you have a lot of questions, we'll get to them all. But just to start off about getting business, if you understand the stuff, you can do very well. I haven't done it in a long time, but I used to run courses for attorneys how to get business, and it covered really a lot of the things I'm going to talk about today. And the people that were able to take that course and complete it, which wasn't a ton of people. It was like 15 or 20 people. More than half of them during the course were able to get clients. And so this is a decent sized client. So this is really an important webinar. And it's something that I hope you'll understand when we're done and really learn a lot and then hopefully ask good questions. And today, I'm going to talk to you about how to get clients. I'm going to tell you about why anyone you meet, regardless of how important you think they are, is a potential client, should be treated that way. I'm also going to, let me just see here. And I'm also going to talk about even being in law school, and during your first few years out of law school, a lot of people tend to believe that the most important aspect of your career is getting into a great firm, or billing a lot of hours and working hard and doing quality work. By the way, billing a lot of hours, all that means is making your firm a lot of money. If you can make your firm a lot of money, that's a great thing. And when you have business, that's what it means when you get older, to make your firm a lot of money. What happens as you get more senior as an attorney, meaning you start getting a couple of years of experience, you start to see that the people that have the business are really the people that are in control. and the law firms and the people that are getting the respect from associates. And then you start seeing when people start getting promoted that the people that are becoming partners often have business. And so this is very important. It's if you don't understand how to do this, you will be stuck in an associate. You may leave as an associate and lose your job as an associate. You may have to worry about going in-house if you don't learn how to do this. You may become a counsel because you don't have business. You may become a contract partner or an on-equity partner. And none of these things are bad. But what I'm saying is if you want to take control of your career and have power, then you really need to do this. Now, what do I do? All day, every day, I work on people trying to find jobs. And it's very easy if someone has a business. There's almost no need for a recruiter. Now, recruiters obviously help and negotiate and do a lot of things, but the opportunities for people with business are just profound. Law firms are very interested in people with business. As long as the billing rate and the type of work that they do is consistent with what they do, then law firms are almost always interested in partners with business. But with associates and people that don't have business, you often need a much different approach. You need to look at a lot of firms and see if they have work. You need to maybe look outside your market and do all these things. You need to be willing to accept a lower salary than you're making. So it's much more difficult as an attorney to have the ability to survive in your career and to have flexibility, not lack of flexibility if you have business. Because if you have business, if you're working in, I don't know, New Orleans, Louisiana, and you're a senior attorney, you don't need to move. You can stay in that city and continue to work there. But if you don't have business and you're maybe a corporate attorney, you're going to need to look at Texas. You'll need to look at Mississippi and Florida and all these other markets because there may not be enough opportunities for you. So this is hugely important. Nothing is more important than getting business. And so you need to understand how to get into business as an attorney. And then you need to understand how to find clients and how clients work. And again, I think this is an incredibly important webinar. I don't know of any topics that are more important than this. Maybe there are some, but this is very important. And your success in generating clients and business is going to determine your success as an attorney. It's going to determine your happiness as an attorney. It's going to determine your income as an attorney. It's going to determine your stability as an attorney. All these things are what you need if you're going to be successful. And your security, in my opinion, is really one of the number one things, because security only goes to people that have business. Because if you don't have business, you become an expense if the law firm doesn't have enough work. If you go in-house, you become an expense if the company's going through changes. Look how many companies lay people off and go out of business. This is the only way to have security as an attorney. And I've been doing this job for a quarter century. I can tell you with 100% certainty that there's nothing more important than have business. Now, I can get people jobs without business. I do it every day. But if you don't have business, you're going to have a much harder time in your career, and you're not going to be in control. And that's the problem. And if you have work, it's going to give you a platform where you're going to be able to hire others to work for you. It's going to give you the ability to start your own firm if you want, to have your own way of doing things, maybe make more money. It's just going to give you so many options. It's incredible. The greatest success, I think, for a lot of people, from how they feel about themselves, for how much money they make, for how much security they have, comes from having a lot of work to do and having business. So I'm going to tell you today how people get clients. There's not really a ton of information that you're going to need to know. But the problem is, in all of my time talking to thousands of law firms all over the country, only firm I ever spoke with that said that they would show people how to get business. The only one I ever spoke to one firm in the history of what I do. And it was Shepherd Mullen, a firm in LA. And they were serious about it. They would take their people that go to work there and they would train them how to do it. And people will become successful. And not a lot of law firms do this. They have no incentive to teach you. They do, but if they teach you how to get business, that means you're going to be not billing hours, and they make money when people are billing hours. So this is something you need to learn. And again, no one's going to tell you this. No one's going to tell you you're billing too much and it's hurting your health, because it's not in their best interest. Most people you're working for as an associate or of counsel or as a contracted partner, make money when you do work. They don't make money when you're out getting business. This is something you need to do on your own. And I'm very sorry that I have to be the person that shows you how to do this. Now, I'm not saying that tons of great firms and AmLaw 100 and 200 and all sorts of firms, they do have in-house things where they talk about how to get business. And so I'm not saying that firms don't do this, but formal training in this is something that is not done. And again, it's because unless you do this, no one necessarily has a big incentive to show you how to do it. And once you do start doing it, you'll find resistance. I remember talking to attorneys as recently as last week that were complaining about fighting for credit with their firm about a client they brought in. And so again, even though this isn't easy, it's something you need to do to have long-term security in your career. No matter how good of an attorney you are, no matter how smart you are, no matter how good of a writer you are, no matter how well you document transactions, it pales in comparison to the importance of getting business, because there's always going to be people that can work harder than you. There's always going to be people that are smarter than you. There's always going to be people that are younger than you and will work more cheaply. But there's not going to be people that put all that effort into getting business. And I'll tell you, when I meet with the most successful attorneys that have a lot of business, what's very funny is they spend maybe just as much, if not more time, doing client development as they do doing the work. And sometimes, a lot of times, it's more important I'm just going to say this, to get the clients and get them in the door than it is sometimes even how much work you do on the clients once you get them in. There's people that are in law firms called binders, which are people that there's binders, grinders, and finders. I don't know, but finders are people that go out and find the work. And then grinders, of course, are the people that do the work. And then minders are the people that watch the people doing the work. Minders are the management and bureaucracy of a law firm and the HR department. And then you have your grinders, which are doing all the work. And then you have your finders, which are going out and doing things. So I'm going to talk to you today about how to be a finder. Now, there's certainly plenty of roles for grinders, meaning people that go out and do the work. And if that's what you want, then you're going to be competing with everyone else that wants to be a grinder, which is the majority, the substantial majority, 95% of attorneys out there. Or you'll be competing with the minders, which are people that are in executive kind of roles. They don't necessarily have business. They can work they can be administrators in the firm, or not necessarily administrators. They're often partners. They're people that may be oversee associates, and there's just different types of minders. And law firms need minders too. But being a finder is really the most valuable skill. The world opens up to finders. The law firms open up. Everything opens up. Your potential business opens up. So the first thing you need to remember when you want to get business is that every person you meet is someone who will potentially be in a position to be a future client or to refer someone to you. This is a hugely important point. So one of the things, it's interesting, I don't know if I'm going to talk about this again in this webinar, but there used to be people that would train attorneys how to get business. And when I was practicing law, there was only like one well-known person that was doing it. And he had some sort of cassette course where he would send you cassettes, or maybe it was CDs, I don't remember, but he would send you some CDs and you would study them. And then if you wanted, you could talk to him on the phone for $500 or something. But the course was essentially this. It was write down every single person that you know, meaning your family, your friends, your acquaintances, or people that you know. And usually people would write down about 100 people that they know, or maybe 200, and just keep calling and talking and checking in with those people and be friendly with them, because those people will know people and those people will know people. And that really is one of the secrets, is just remembering that every person you know, you don't have to call them up and ask them for business. You just check in with them. And this is hugely important. This is what lots and lots of people that are very good at this do. And when you're friendly to a lot of people, those people are going to feel good about, if you're nice to them, referring you to other people. So most attorneys and law students ignore that every single person they meet is someone who could be a client or will someday be in a position to client. You may look at your classmates when you're in law school as competition for grades. You may look at people in your law firm as competition for work. You may look at the world as in competition with you or for money. You may look at people you know that went to business school as peers that you're competing with for prestige, or I don't know. You may look at your family as someone that was mean to you. You may look at friends of your family as someone. This is how a lot of people think. You need to start thinking in a way that everybody you surround yourself with is going to have the power and the influence collectively to control your future. This is what happens. The people that I know, people that I went to law school with that are heads of major international law firms, different departments. And I just remember them as being the most friendly people imaginable. You couldn't dislike them. They were just very nice. And I'm not saying being nice is one way to do it, but I'm saying that just remember that everybody out there is a potential client. If you size people up and you're only nice to certain types of people, and you think that you only need to talk to people that are on the way up, that everyone's thinking the best of and assessing whether they could be their clients, you're making a huge mistake. I know one attorney that built a huge book of business. Like when I say huge, I don't know what it was, like 5 to 10 million. I mean, which isn't as big as it probably will be in the future. But that person built a huge book of business by approaching people that were having problems in house jobs, people that were getting fired, people that were being downsized by let go and mergers and things, approaching them and seeing if there was anyone he could introduce them to or help them when he had no obligation to do it. And often when he didn't even know them. And imagine going out and talking to people that have lost their jobs as general counsels of companies and asking them if there's anything you can do, trying to find a match or something, and just being really nice and connecting with them. And maybe he had knew these people on LinkedIn, maybe, I don't know, but going out and finding people that are down on their luck, that are going to probably be back into something, doing favors for people. Everyone you meet is a potential client. The people that you're in your law firm with now are your potential clients. And you just don't know. These people, some of them are going to be general counsels of big corporations. So it's your decision. Do you want to go and compete with them and undermine them and play games and hide from them and hide the carrot, hide work? You can do that, but it's the dumbest move imaginable. If you are someone that is playing a long game, meaning you're planning on being in the legal profession for a long time, then what you need to do is assume that everyone is a potential client. A lot of people assume that the janitor in their building could never be their client. That's just not true. Janitors know people. Janitors may talk to people, may keep in touch with them that leave and go in house. They may have a relative that has a business. You just don't know. They may have a child that they raised that became a very successful business owner. You don't know. And then janitors and people like that talk to other attorneys and say who's nice to them and who's not. One of the smartest things you can do, by the way, when you go into an interview is be incredibly nice to the person behind the front desk, because that person will talk to the attorneys that are in power about saying that they thought you were nice or you seem like a good fit, but they will. It happens probably more 50% of the time. All this stuff happens. So you need to make sure that if people are people that you may know, that you're nice to them. Recruiting personnel inside of law firms, also hugely important. They're asked for their opinion. Often they're the only ones making the decision. Some of the most important people. People that sell you auto insurance, you may assume they could never be your client. Someone who once is your biggest enemy could never be your client. Sometimes the people that you had bad interactions with in the past, if you make up with them, will make up with you by giving you business. All these people are potential sources of business. You just don't know. I've heard so many people get referrals from very important people that they knew. Or very unimportant people that they knew. Janitor sons. I remember when I was growing up, my mother had a maid that came and cleaned once a week. And her daughter, I met her at her father's funeral, at her husband's funeral, was an attorney at the biggest law firm in Detroit and had gone to a local law school. And you just don't know. Everybody you meet is a potential client. The automobile insurance salesman, who knows? And the pre-IPO companies, people go and start companies all the time and get funding, and then they need attorneys to help them, and they get money lots of money that they can spend. When I was practicing law, I received a lot of business from one of these types of clients. And I've heard lots and lots of stories about people getting business in similar situations. And in my case, if I had stay with the practice of law, I'm sure that I could have built the clients I had into something larger, millions of dollars in fees. And you just never can underestimate the people you meet. You have to, as an attorney, you actually have to go out and present a face to the world where you're available to help, where they should like you, where people ask you about you, what you do. People like saying they know an attorney. People like saying they know a good attorney. People like contacting attorneys and getting referrals to other attorneys. People like it all the time. I was years ago, I was not too many years ago, but I was just taking acting classes and just having fun doing that. I think I would do it like every Thursday or something to give me a break from work. And then I would go to these retreats and stuff. To this day, all I said was I was an attorney, even though I could have explained that I'm a recruiter, but I just said I'm an attorney. And then I said, but it doesn't matter. But to this day, there were maybe 30 or 40 people in the acting class. And I would say 30% of them contacted me asking if I could help them with legal work. Now, it was nothing I wanted to do, but think about that. Just being nice to people in a freaking class that has nothing to do with practicing law was somewhere that I could, and then I would have to explain to people that I'm a recruiter. But the point is that everyone you meet is a potential source of business for you. Everyone. It doesn't matter if you're with the most prestigious law firm out there or with a smaller firm, or even if you're practicing on your own. Every single person is a potential client. I saw one attorney the other day, in the past 10 days, meaning people that you work with now, people that you're doing work for. I remember it was very funny. I was in a law firm and I'd been at another law firm. So I'd been at this Quinn Emanuel, and then I went to work at this other law firm, Dewey Ballantyne. And there was a paralegal that used to do work for me and was very nice to me at Quinn Emanuel. She referred a large trademark client to me and Dewey Ballantyne. Imagine, what the heck? And I don't know why she referred it to me. I don't know if there was a conflict or something, but just referred that person to me, the company, and with the business. Just absolutely incredible. So you can get referrals from your old firm. You can get referrals from your secretaries at your old firm. You can get referrals. If you do it right and you're nice to people, this is what happens. So every single person, I don't care if it's a summer associate and you're a junior, so I don't care who it is. If you're nice to people and they see you as someone that takes things seriously, then you can do very well. And again, this includes your peers in college, law school, and your employers. Some of my first business came from someone I went to high school with that started these kind of upstart companies in San Francisco during the internet boom, and referred to me, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of business. This is when I'm like a second or third year attorney. And then he referred to me some of his clients. Then his clients referred people to me too. So if you come into contact with anyone, just realize that these people can all be your future clients. You really do. I'm serious. You can't. The problem with a lot of people, myself included, by the way, I'm guilty of this, but a lot of people are just motivated by their ego, and they see the world in terms of who's better than them, or who they're better than, or who they don't like and who they do, and something that was said to them that they're mad about, and someone that else is that nice to them. And then they play tit for tat and games with people, and they're only giving to themselves to the extent that someone's giving. All these kind of rules that people approach relationships don't work. This is not how you get business, by being open with people, by treating people well, by not expecting anything in return, by making people feel good about themselves, all this sort of stuff. And if you look at your own firm and look at the attorneys that don't have business, I would be willing to bet anything that they're not all the things that I'm saying. They're something else. Now, there are people that certainly do get business without being that way, but in the majority of time, that's just not the case. Your relatives, you shouldn't take your relatives for granted. It's like a lot of people don't think it's they shouldn't keep in touch with uncles and aunts and all that sort of stuff. And then the only time they start doing it, especially if they're people that give them business, is when they need them. And then at that point, it's usually too late. I knew once, this is an interesting story. I knew a guy that was the income partner at Hunt & Williams, and he'd gone to University of Virginia Law School. He'd done very well there. He was president of the school or something, I don't know, whatever it was, the student, just very likable, very outgoing. And he went to Hunton Williams, which is a great firm. And you can't say, and I don't have anything negative to say about them. It's every other firm, though. He was there for a few years and I don't know, 10 or 12 years, and then didn't make partner. I did make partner, but then didn't get any business. And so what happens at most firms, if you don't have any business after you become an income partner, they will let you go after a few years. They will just say, we're sorry, but our partners need to have business. And this is just how it works. There's nothing against Hunton Williams. There's nothing, because this is how all firms are for the most part. Not all of them, but a lot of them, especially when work slows down. So he was laid off, jobless. And then one of his uncles found out about it and said, why didn't you call me? Because he was always very nice to someone. He said, I'm referring, I don't know, $150,000 a month to this other law firm to do litigation for me. Why don't you do it for me? And he never even knew that guy was doing that. He knew the guy had a big company or whatever, but he never knew what was happening. And boom, his business started. And again, relatives love to tell people you're a lawyer. And relatives also love to use you for legal work. And again, even if you're not a successful, even if you don't think your relatives know anyone and your friends and things, the odds are pretty good that they will refer legal work. So you have to treat them well. Every single friend, I think, that I was in college, high school, good friends, sent me legal work at some point and referred legal work to me. Now, most of it I couldn't do. It was DUIs and things like that, but it worked. Former employers, you should never take for granted. So your former employers and everyone in them, they could move to other employers, they could go in-house, they could be conflicted out of work. All sorts of things can happen. So staying in touch with people, whether it's Christmas cards or whatever, or holiday cards or birthday cards and birthday emails or calls is very important. Those people, if they think you're serious, will also send you business. And your former employers also often will have work and transactions and things they don't want to do that you can do. Maybe they charge too much. Maybe they're conflicted. You don't know, but these are huge. Like, why wouldn't you be extremely nice to your former employers and stay in touch with them when they're coming up and talking to potential clients of yours every day? Like, why would you storm out of a firm and say, oh, I don't like the compensation, or, oh, someone was mean to me, or, oh, I'm not getting challenged enough, or, oh, I didn't get a bonus. Like, why would you burn any freaking bridge when these people could support you with business for the rest of your life? Think about it. In 10 days, I gave $500,000 worth of business to an attorney. And I'm not even practicing law. This is what people can do when they know people. And whatever the case, you need to realize that former employers are people, and they're in a position to give you a lot of work. So you should never burn bridges wherever you go. And you should make sure your former employers are always your advocates, meaning they're always going to be behind you, and they're always going to want to help you, and they're always going to think positively of you because they will help you. And they're going to be in a position to give you work, and they're going to talk about you to others who also give you work. In addition to working for people and working hard, you should also try to bond with them a little and be their friends and be seen as an upstanding type of person and not critical of their firm and not critical of people in your firm. This will all help you. Your superiors, people will often take them for granted. So superiors can be a huge source of business. And for the same reason that your former employers can, your superiors know people. They can refer a lot of work to you. You always need to go above and beyond the call of duty, meaning your superiors are not. This is one of the craziest mistakes that people make. I still don't understand it, but it's what happens. A lot of times people, now I'm not going to be critical here, but I'm just going to be flat out say it. People come out of backgrounds where the boss is always the bad person, or where they have to unionize or get together against people that have the ability to pay them, and that's a certain type of mentality, or they're against the people that are running the company or the business. And I don't know if you call it socialism or communism. It doesn't matter to me what you call this, but it's this thing where I'm doing the work. I should get paid a certain amount of money. This person is essentially my enemy and is going to try to rip me off and take advantage of me. So I need to stand up for myself. And like this sort of attitude, and I see it a lot, but it does not work. It will hold you back. So you need to basically not approach things that way, but approach things with the idea that you're going to try to help this person. You're on the same team. You're exactly the kind of person that can help them the way they need to, and all that sort of thing. And if you approach things that way, you're going to be much better off. You want your superiors to like you. You want them to have good memories of you. You want them to, when someone asks them about you years later, or when they see you doing something years later, they speak highly of you and they're excited for your success. Like, why would you not want anybody that you've ever worked for to think highly of you? You need to go into your firms, your current firm, your past firms, if possible, your future firms, and make everyone like you. I have this experience too with candidates, and not a lot of them, but I can remember early in my career, my phone would ring and it would be someone, they would say, "Hi, my name is," and then they would tell me the name and they would say what I do. And I'm looking at the network. I just wanted to let you know what I do. And I'm like just going out and trying to form bonds. And I still remember those people's names. And of course, those people are big partners in big law firms or big jobs in-house because they were out just networking with recruiters, trying to get on their map and everything. I had another experience. I keep talking about this, but where this guy was in our system in BCG, and he was my candidate, but he was a senior like securitization candidate or something like that didn't think was employable because he was 20 years out and I don't know, working as a contractor. But so BCG, we send it all. And if you're one of my candidates, you probably know we send out all these automated emails and trying to get people to, some of them are not automated, but a lot of them are trying to get people to approve firms and to upload the resume. So every time he got one of these, he would write back, "Hey, thanks so much for your support. It's great. And I love this." And I was like, what the hell's going on with this guy? Most people are like why they aren't mean about it and they just follow. But this guy was like that. He was like that with everything, like just incredibly positive and incredibly like he wound up getting a job like in London at a giant magic circle firm as counsel, and he came back to the United States. So people that are like this, people want to help them. I wanted to help them. I still remember him because no one's like that. So you have to be nice to people. You shouldn't take anyone for granted, including recruiters, including everyone. Just being nice to people. Most people do not call recruiters and talk to them and see how they're doing and what they know about and flatter them. They just don't do that. They think they're the enemy, or they think they have to be on guard. But no one you should take for granted, especially people that can help you. Everyone out there is a source of potential business and work. And how you treat the world, both inside and outside of work, is about the most calculating move you can make. Being nice to people is about the most calculating move you can make. You need to remember that every single person that you meet is a source of potential business. Now, how do you learn to like people? How do you learn to get along with people? How do you do all those things? There's a lot of ways to do it. And it's not something that I can teach. I can make you aware of how important it is. But there's books like How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. There's courses about it that they offer. And honestly, it's funny, but Warren Buffett keeps a certificate that anyone can get from, if you go and take a 3-day course in this Dale Carnegie course, he keeps a certificate framed behind his desk. I don't even know if he's got his diplomas up there, but he's got this. And people ask him, like, what is this certificate from this 3-day Dale Carnegie course? He says, because it's the most important course I've ever taken. I've made more money from this course than anything, and I'm very proud of it. A course about how to get business, a certificate about how to get along with people, and that's the most important thing that one of the richest men in the world learned from. Think about that. That's a pretty big statement about how important it is to get along with people and be nice to people. Hold on one second. Okay, let me move on here. Okay, another thing that's very important if you want to get business is to talk about your work. I remember, I guess it was more than 20 years ago, but I was in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I was taking a course called franchising law at the school. And I was in a hotel ballroom watching an attorney from a very prestigious Southern law firm give a 3-hour PowerPoint presentation called Developments in Franchising Law. Now, I was taking franchising law because I thought, heck, maybe I'll buy a franchise at some point or something, but it was not an interesting course, to say the least. And every local owner of this presentation who owned a Burger King, a Subway, McDonald's and other franchises had shown up for this event and was there watching this presentation. And I had been required to go to this course, but I call the event bizarre because it was very funny. The speaker was a Southern gentleman type, wearing a bow tie and talking in a friendly drawl. And we spoke for 3 hours about developments in franchising law that couldn't have been more boring. I think at one point, I might have fallen asleep, but it was just really boring and nothing interesting about it. Nothing interesting and nothing exciting about its effect. Talking about various state laws that just no one would be interested in. And he even seemed bored by this presentation. He was just, I don't know, he didn't seem very excited. And I remember making eye contact with people that were in my class that I knew, and we were almost had a hard time not even laughing, and because we couldn't, because it was really bad presentation. I thought that this presentation had been a disaster. I couldn't imagine how there was any point to this presentation. But to my surprise, all the local owners of the franchise seemed to be sitting there at attention, and they tried to appear interested and putting their hand on their cheeks and stuff as if they were thinking, and they really seemed like they were interested. But I knew franchising law at that point. It was at the end of the semester, and there was nothing interesting. And then I spoke, there was a break. They took a break after like an hour and a half. 2 hours. And I was spoken to the owner of a local, I guess it was a cleaning franchise, and no one seemed to have any idea what this guy was talking about either. But they said he's obviously an expert, and I know this person that's used him and so forth. And so when the event ended, I watched, and there was like a line of people asking him for his business card, telling him they enjoyed his presentation, and asking him questions about franchising or employees and things, and wanted to talk to him. And because of the volume of cards and things he took, I don't know how many clients he got that day. I don't know if it was 5 or 10 or more, but I'm sure he got a lot of clients. And right there, I realized that something very significant had happened. And I didn't really realize it quite until years later how profound this was. But just because he'd spoken so much about developments in franchising law and invited him to this event, everyone presumed he must be good at what he did. And because no one else was holding seminars about franchising in Charlottesville, Virginia for local McDonald's and cleaning and other franchises and real estate franchises, they assumed he was good and were eager to hire him. So when you think about it, who do you want for assistance when you have a matter? If you're run over by a car, like who are you going to hire? What kind of personal injury attorney are you going to hire? If you're any type of legal issue that you have, who are you going to hire? You're really going to hire the person that seems the most enthusiastic and that talks about it and is out there promoting the work. And that's really important. So sounding enthusiastic and being enthusiastic are likely the only way you're going to be able to attract people to you. So what do attorneys do? Some of them write articles. A lot of them give public talks. I know this attorney that I referred $500,000 in business to in 10 days is always out there traveling and giving talks. She flies to Calgary to give talks. She flies to Texas to give a talk. She flies to wherever she can. She's flying around giving. And I'm like, how does this person have time to practice law? But they're out there constantly promoting. Talking about your work goes much deeper than that. I have found so many attorneys, if I have an obscure legal issue that affects my business, I'll do a search for something about that obscure legal issue. And many times I'll only find 1 or 2 people that have written about it. And so that helps. That's a good way. But there's a lot that goes deeper, though, than being seen writing articles or giving talks or whatever it is. There's a lot more to it. Talking about your work means getting very enthusiastic about your work with every person you encounter. It means if you have the opportunity, talking about what you do. It means talking about even when in your office, like if you're working on a specific type of thing, talking about your work. It means talking about your work with your clients and what you do, and then having insights that other people don't have, and not just providing the work, but telling people about ideas and things and making them feel good for hiring you. And the reason all this is important is most people remember those who are enthusiastic about their work. If a personal injury attorney relied on you to just find them somewhere, they probably wouldn't get a lot of work. If they, in Los Angeles, you drive around and it's all your billboards for attorneys, and They talk about how they're the best and the most aggressive and everything. They're talking about their work. And those are the ones you remember. That also goes for your peers. You want to be recommended as seen as someone who enjoys your work. If you sit around and you talk to your peers about how much you dislike your work or how hard it is or how unfair the hours are or how bad things are, you're not going to have the reputation as someone who's enthusiastic about your work. Now, if you meet things with enthusiasm, if you don't get upset, if you're not critical of your firm, if you help other people in your firm that need help without expecting anything in return and not talking about how you're helping people, then people are going to want to refer work to you. I'll tell you a quick story. I was in a law firm once, and they hired the son of a client that had a lot of business. And the client had a lot of business, not the son. And the son was not anywhere near intellectually capable of doing the kind of work that this firm had, meaning couldn't write properly, couldn't reason, legal arguments were bad, missed legal arguments, and all these sorts of things. I was very nice to him. I would help him without billing my time, without talking about it. And for years after, he used to call with all these referrals to different attorneys that he knew. Now, most of them weren't good referrals. They weren't people that I could help, but he still wanted to help me. So think about what it means when you help people. And just remember, an example, the attorney I heard talking about franchising law. Think about what happened with this person if he'd been interesting. All he had to do was show up and talk about franchising law, and he got a lot of business. And so you need to speak too. And you need to speak a lot about what you do. And again, this is a fun line. I'm sure you've heard it a lot. It says, you can build a better mousetrap, but if the world does not know about it, they will beat a path right around your door. I was at I like telling the story. I've never told it before, but I just remembered it. I was at a seminar once years ago for this marketing guy named Frank Kern. And he's always trying to sell courses about how to market and charge people for webinars and not stuff that I do. I write emails and I don't know. I was at this seminar and he was up there talking in a frenzy. And at one point he said something like, it doesn't even matter what you're selling. As long as you talk about it, people are going to buy it. So he's basically saying that the product, talking about just talking is more important than the actual product. So people need to know what you do and they need to think you're enthusiastic about it. If you seem enthusiastic, that's why people are going to go to you. That's why restaurants, they put signs in the highway. Why? Remember this pea soup, like it's one restaurant, it's actually in Michigan, and not Michigan, in California, has all these signs up, like saying that in 200 miles, you're going to have this, be close to this pea soup place. And then you're like 100 miles later, it's telling you, and then 50 miles, and then how many, it's just pea soup. And no one thinks about a pea soup, but people are enthusiastic and say it's the world's best pea soup. And then you go to this place and there's like tons of people lined up for pea soup. It's ridiculous. But all you have to do is be enthusiastic about something. And if you talk about it, people will want to work with you. I don't care what it is. It could be one aspect of corporate law. It could be something, it doesn't matter. So you need to talk about your work. It's incredibly important. If you don't talk about your work, one of the things was interesting is I was talking to a couple of attorneys in a law firm not too long ago. And it was in a law firm that was trying to get people to hire. They were trying to bring other people into the office of this law firm. So I was working on it. And so I called a few attorneys in this office, and they had these incredible qualifications, but no business. When I say incredible, it was like beyond. It was like PhDs from Stanford and things like, and so it's just amazing. But clerking for Supreme Court people or something, literally they had a Supreme Court clerk. But they just, when I talked to them, they were just really flat. They didn't really have anything to say. They talked, if you asked them what they did, they talked like in one line, like patent litigation. And so I remember that. And then I talked to the partner that was trying to open getting more people in office. He said, they're the most common types of attorneys out there. They just think that because they have these great qualifications, people should come to them and give them business without them asking for it. And I said, do they have any business? And he said, no. So think about that. And that's why the firm was trying to bring in more rainmakers and stuff. So just having good qualifications doesn't get you business. I can't believe how much money some of these personal injury and other people make to go around advertising their services. It's astonishing to me, to the point where they take vacations and they have their own planes. What the hell? And they don't have the kind of legal qualifications that you would even think are that would anything close to normal. Or I was talking to one of them, and they were getting seats to go to the Super Bowl for $30,000 each or something. I mean, and they don't have great qualification, meaning bottom of their class from bottom 10 law schools. It's just, but they know how to get business. And so I want to tell you that getting out there, talking about, telling people what you do, getting enthusiastic about it makes a huge difference. If you want to get business, you also need to set a good example. So what this means is you need to walk the walk and talk the attorney, or talk with the type of attorney that others would want to be represented by. This is incredibly important. Other people need to believe that you're an attorney who could effectively represent them and would always be out looking out for their best interest, meaning they need to respect you. They need to think you're interested in what you do. They need to think that you're not trying to rip them off. They need to think that you're a good person. And I'll just tell you, I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney with business, but I'm also in a position where I now need to hire outside counsel for different things that I do. And there's a lot of issues that people are likely to be concerned about when hiring you. And this is just how attorneys are. You can talk your way out of jobs, or you can talk your way in. But one of the things that most attorneys are concerned about is your perceived level of honesty, meaning, are you going to try to rip them off? Do you have their best interests in mind? Are you someone that they trust? Are you someone that's going to try to help them? And again, I would never want to hire an attorney who seems blatantly honest, but attorneys are always trying to be vague with their clients. And a person who's billing you on an hourly basis, honestly, should be someone who's telling the truth. You want people that are telling the truth and not trying to play games. When you bring in a client, but there's a couple different ways to think about bringing in a client. And I'll just tell you how they are. Some people that bring in clients think to themselves, this is great. I have the opportunity to bill a lot of money. I'm going to make a ton of money. And isn't this awesome? I can bill this person a lot of money. This is how a lot of people think. This is a losing proposition. It's the exact opposite of what the attorneys build big books of business do. Attorneys that bring in big books of business get a client. They think, this is awesome. I'm going to try to save this person money. I'm going to set the best example I can. I'm going to hope they give me more work. And even this is a small amount of work, I know that this person is going to have legal work in the future. So I'm going to try to make them think I'm saving them as much money as possible and do the best job I possibly can. That's how these people think. And that's what you need to think of things. It's not that you're going to make money. It's not that this is a one-shot deal. Anybody that tries to do something like a one-shot deal, it never works out. People that make up their hours, it never works out. People that play games, it never works out. I know when I was practicing law, and I know a lot of attorneys that made up their hours, including very high-ranking partners. And it doesn't mean something you talk about, but I just, an example was, I remember there was an associate working all weekend, and he completed an assignment. He literally had been up since Friday night and turned in an assignment at 7 a.m. On a Monday. And then he went and changed and went to take a shower. He returned after taking a shower and resting a little bit, and went into the office with a partner to discuss the assignment that he put on the chair, I guess, that morning. And the associate saw a timesheet that indicated that the partner had assisted with the brief that had been written all weekend and was billing 25 hours of his time, and the partner had not worked at all. I'm not sure now that I know that. I certainly, even though I thought that was a very talented attorney, would never refer work to that attorney. The associate that saw that would never refer that work to that attorney. The associate that saw that would think that there were people in the law firm that were dishonest and powerful and never would refer work to that attorney. There's just or firm. So you have to understand you need to set a good example. And the other thing that's important too is, how do you conduct yourself in your personal life or your work life? If you do things that are weird in your personal life and work life, then this is going to get out, and people will have judgments about it, and they will keep you in power and keep you employed or not employed based on the things that you do in your personal life. And it's just how it works. You're always being tested. I saw, and in my job, like, I'm always talking to attorneys, and very powerful attorneys in some cases, that have lost their jobs. I saw one attorney with a huge book of business. I don't know what it was. It was $20 million at a big firm. And he had a relationship with a paralegal that was consensual 7 or 8 years previously. and that paralegal's current boyfriend was told about it. And then when they broke up, he called the firm and told them about it. And the person was literally blackballed from the legal profession for this. Come on. This is how because that he was in power, even though and could have exerted power because he had more power than this person, than the paralegal. It wasn't because things were consensual, because he didn't do anything wrong other than that. So you have to be very honest about your personal life. You have to be very careful, and you're being tested. I know one woman that was fired from a firm ostensibly for performance reasons, but it happened right after, anyway, she'd had a relationship with someone that her boss thought was improper outside of work. You're always being tested, whether it's in the store, you give work to, when you're doing your work, when you're turning in your hours, and you want to be dealing with people that are honest as well. And your clients will always ask if you're honest, and they'll give you their honest opinions about something. If you go out of your way to be honest or save people money, they'll talk about that too. Another one is the attorney who goes out partying with the clients and has wild evenings. That in some firms is actually acceptable. But when you act inappropriately like that and you don't handle yourself in a good way, that can hurt you. I knew of an attorney at a major law firm in New York that was a partner that apparently was accused of, I think he got into a taxi after a Christmas party and fell down or something. And the firm was upset about it. And because he'd been drinking a lot and I think he lost his job. But it's just, you have to be very careful. And clients, it's the same way. Clients don't want to be around people that aren't behaving well, who are making bad decisions. It used to be, it's interesting, like this is when people talk about Donald Trump, but one of the things that happened to him, which is very interesting, early in his career, in the early 90s, he had been married to, I don't know, Ivanka or I don't know, whatever the person was, Ivanka Trump, and it came out publicly that he'd been having an affair while married with someone named Marla Maples, who he subsequently married. You would think that, whatever, he's a powerful real estate guy. What's the problem with that? Whatever. And this stuff happens. But what happened to him because of that was banks all of a sudden were like, wait a minute, this is a person may not be trustworthy anymore. What are we doing with someone that isn't conducting himself? So banks started calling his loans and he almost went bankrupt. Now, I don't know if that was the complete cause of it, but from what I understand, it was. You have to figure out, again, the world is much less conservative now than it was back then, but you have to make sure that you present a certain picture to the world that people like, and that makes you look good. When you examine most organizations that are very successful and have been around for a long time, it's very easy to see that they look for steady people and not people that are out to prove something. And when they look at people that are able to manage themselves quite well, and it's something that companies need and law firms. And law firms look for this because they need reliable people to run their company successfully, and so do law firms. So you need to act at all times the same way you would want your attorney to act and behave. And just think about that. I don't know what you think is acceptable and what you don't think is acceptable, but just think about what you would want from your doctor. Would you want your doctor to be out all the time, or what would you want? So I'll tell you two quick stories. When I was young, I fell on glass and on my face when I was a baby. And anyway, so when I got to be like, I don't know, 13 years old or something, I had a bad scar, so you probably can't see it anymore. And so I had an operation to get rid of the scar tissue. And the doctor showed up 45 minutes late and did the work. The scar didn't look better after it was done. And later it came out that the guy had a drinking problem and things, was probably hungover. I had another instance where I had a big hearing with an attorney that was representing me in a personal matter. And he missed the hearing and canceled the last minute because he'd been out having a good time. And that kind of stuff and people lose clients because of that. And you just need to be very careful. You have to behave the way you want to behave. And if you don't, especially as a professional, word will get out. And then the other thing that's very important is to be interested in others and their legal issues. It's important that you be interested in the work you're doing and seem like you're interested. And if you're interested in the work you're doing, you also should be seeking out others and provide them advice. If people realize you're interested in something, they're the ones that are going to want to help you. And if they see that you care about what you're doing and what you're talking about, they're going to want to use you. Think about, just real briefly, like what you would expect from a doctor. If you go to a doctor and that doctor talks forever about how enthusiastic they are about some mundane legal procedure and how enthusiastic they are, you're going to be very interested in using that person. You're going to think, I can't believe this person's this interested in it. And then you go to someone else and they're just dumb. You're going to want the person that's the most interested in whatever the topic is that you're working on to help you. And this is just how people think. So if you're interested in something, you're going to do your best to listen and take the time to understand what the other people's problems are. Very few attorneys are very good at understanding people and what their issues are specifically. And so essentially what that means is that the people that do well are often the most interested in other people and in what those people are doing. They're interested in what clients are doing. They're interested in the transactions they're doing. They ask questions and make people feel taken care of. And when you take the time to listen and understand where people are coming from, they're going to be very grateful. In addition, when you take the time to understand what problems are, they're going to feel invested in you and they're going to want to use you. And when others feel interested in you, they want to work with you more closely. So I had an interesting thing happen a couple of times. I went into the doctor recently for this procedure that men are supposed to have or check when they're in their late 40s, which I'm not going to say what it is because I don't know. But anyway, I went in to get this procedure done. And I sat down with this doctor that performs this routine procedure and asked him a few questions. He was at UCLA Hospital, which is considered one of the best hospitals in the country, and sat there and answered questions and talked to me for over a half hour about this procedure. And even though it was a pretty simple procedure and there wasn't really a lot to talk about, this is what the best doctors do. It's also what the best lawyers do. It's also what the best people in most professions do. They're able to talk to you about the procedure or whatever they're doing, or get interested in your issue, and that makes people excited. I remember years ago, I was purchasing some commercial real estate for our businesses and for BCG and house people. And I was talking to all these different banks and things. And one bank I went to, I remember the loan officer was like, tell me all about the building. What do you like about it? And wow, how many offices it have? And what are you going to do? And I realized at some point that this guy had been talking to me for 45 minutes. I don't know how he possibly could have been interested in my thoughts on a commercial 25-year-old building, 4,000 or 5,000 square feet. And I'm sure he wasn't, but I used him because he was the only one that seemed interested. I also used him for another purchase later on. And then I used him for another one after that. So people want you to be interested in. And so when you want clients, there's a couple things you can do. You can allow your clients and your potential clients to speak at length about their legal problems. You can make them feel heard. Most attorneys, a lot of them will say, interrupt the client at some point and say, okay, I understand. Or they will seem uninterested when they're talking to the client and be looking away, which is very easy to see that they're bored. They'll pick up their phone and say, wait a minute, I got a message, or they'll be checking their phone while the person's talking. And it's just very important that you look interested and you act interested in your clients and what their problems are, because most people aren't going to listen. This is one of the biggest mistakes, by the way, that happens to a lot of attorneys when they start getting a lot of business. They get business initially by listening to people, by asking questions, by trying to be as available and heard as possible, and by making the client feel good, answering the phone when they call. And then when that attorney starts getting powerful and getting a lot of business, they stop doing what made them successful in the first place. And so this is something that you need to be able to do with your client, with potential clients. You need to be interested in what they're doing, and you need to make them feel interested, and you need to make them feel heard, and you need to be available. So a few years ago, I was speaking with a branding firm, it's not a law firm, about doing some work for one of our companies. And it was a expensive type of work. I don't know why, I guess I was doing pretty well. And there were two bids, both roughly $250,000. And the company that was my first choice, I invited them to come to my office and meeting with them. And I had some concerns and I wanted to ask them about them. And I never really got the opportunity to speak. All the representative company do was telling me about what was important to him. and the fact that he was a big company, and the fact that they'd done a lot of other work for very important companies, and the fact that they had good employees. But he never had any interest in what I wanted to do and what was important to me. And because of this, I ended up not using the company. And when you think about it, the people who are most interesting to us are the people we like the most, are those who show the most interest in us. Think about the people that you like personally and professionally. They're probably the people that are you're most interested in you. They're the people that ask you questions and talk to you. This is just a very simple point, but I have a place where I go get my hair cut in where I live. And there's 4 or 5 people there that will cut hair. And then there's the guy that I always use. The reason and so I always call there, and they're like, oh, he's not available. And I'm like, when's the sometime I can get in? And it's a lot of times they're inconvenient times. But the only reason I keep going to him, it's nothing special about his haircut. It's just that when I go to the other people, they never talk to me. They never ask questions. They're not interested. They're just doing their job. And so I like going to someone that talks to me and asks me questions. It makes it more enjoyable. And I just feel heard, and I like it more. So this is the same thing that clients are looking for. They want people that are going to show interest in us. And if you're interested in other people, you make them feel acknowledged and understood, and they like you. Think about it. Do you like people that don't listen to you? Do you like people that think they know everything? No. And if you're interested in other people, it's going to make them believe that you're interesting, even if you're not. There's a famous story, a story that one of my mentors, Jay Abraham, often tells. And he said he got on a flight once, and I think I tried the same thing again after he told me about this, but he got on a flight and he was decided that on this flight, he would just try to learn about this person he was sitting next to and ask them a bunch of questions. And so for this 2 or 3 hour flight, he sat next to the person and just asked them question after question about themselves every time they told him something. And when the flight landed, he realized that he hadn't told the person anything about himself. And the person said, this is probably the most interesting conversation I've had in years, or that I can never remember having. And it wasn't a conversation. It was just one person talking about themselves. And so this is how you get that person, if he needed business, would be a good business generator. So attorneys are there to serve others. And this is just a final point you need to realize. And the more you learn about your clients and potential clients, the better you're going to be able to serve them. And the better you're going to be able to know what's acceptable to them and not. And the more they're going to refer people to you. And you really should learn everything you can. The more you know, and the more you can offer and assist them, the more potential work and business they're going to have. Just think about myself going to a barber. Who do I choose? I choose the person that seems interested in me. So very important that you understand that as well. And the next thing is forming relationships. Relationships are different than being nice to people. You need to start somewhere. So in order to get business attorney, you need to meet people and expand outside of your comfort zone. And you need to learn how to break down the boundaries of formality and how to form relationships with people outside of your immediate influence, not just people that you know that could potentially have business, but people in all diverse different types of life and different things. And remember, if you're a young associate, it's never going to be possible for you to develop a book of business if the only people are the people you're meeting through work. You need to get out and meet people outside of work. And it doesn't necessarily need to be the people you think of. This means, of course, going to bar association, other events where people like to be, but it also means going to events where you're likely to stand out because you're an attorney. And there are millions of potential social situations you can inject yourself into. So I remember when I was at this firm, Dewey Ballantine, there was this huge case with this company called Downey Community Hospital. And I don't know what it was about, but I worked on it and other people worked on it, and it was generating millions and millions of dollars in fees. And it was simply brought in by an attorney that happened to live in Downey and did some volunteer work sitting on some board for the hospital with no necessarily indication that it would ever lead to business. He was from Downey. He was asked by a friend to participate. You would never think that it would get business, but just being involved in something like that got him business. He was the only attorney on the board, and he said he could do it. And so you need to get involved in as many social situations outside of work that are potentially conducive to work as you possibly can. And this networking is going to give you the ability to meet new people and connect. These people may refer relationships to you, or they may not. And if you do not start to form relationships, then you're not going to be someone who can get business in the first place. And you need relationships. You need people to like you and to feel heard. And you need to be out there forming relationships. And so how do you form relationships? I don't know. You join things and you meet people, you go to things where you're not necessarily looking to get business, but business can arise from just being in the right place at the right time. And that's how it works. If a lawyer specializes, they typically will get a lot more business than one who doesn't. So specialization is incredibly important. An attorney with a certain specialty is likely to get a lot more work in this same specialty when it becomes available. People are going to refer clients to attorneys that specialize. People want to use experts. Just as you would want to use an expert if you had brain cancer, you wouldn't go see a random doctor at the urgent care. You would want a specialist. And this is how clients think too. One of the things that I talk about almost every week on webinars, and it's very important, is the ability to specialize. So I look at resumes all day, not all day, but several hours a day. I review resumes. And the one thing I'm always looking for is, can I put this person into a specialty? Is there some sort of specialty that this person does? Is there something that makes them a specialist as opposed to a generalist? Because law firms hire specialists, clients hire specialists. So a lot of times an attorney will think, I do litigation, but you know what? I also did a little data privacy work, and I also was asked to work on a corporate thing once, and isn't that cool? And then, you know what? That now that I think about it, I also worked on an employment case once. No, you should say you're a litigator, commercial litigator. You shouldn't try to say you do a bunch of different things, because if you look like you do a bunch of different things, it looks like you're not specialized and you're not an expert in anything. And experts are more efficient with their time. They know what they're doing. They know what they want. They can help you more than generalists. And so it's the same thing with attorneys. You want to look like a specialist. How do you do it? If you say you're a general litigator, that's a start. But if you specialize in something like representing manufacturers of disposable lighters that are defective and injure people, that's probably better. And there are people that do jobs like that. And you need to also put on your marketing hat. Being a marketer means if someone's looking for someone that does one thing, and when people need your service, then you're that person. I know all these stories about people that developed huge books of business, and it's very interesting. A lot of times you'll say early in their career, I think data privacy litigation is something that's going to be a big deal, because look at Facebook and all these people selling people's information and using it for elections. I think that's interesting. I'm going to read everything I can about it and study it. If you do something like that, you'll find pretty soon you're like one of the leading attorneys in the country if you're at a big firm, because of all your knowledge and expertise and your ability to say you specialize. If you do things like that with any practice area, people are going to want to use your service. And so you want to be found when people are using your service. And if you're good at what you do and specialize, then people will find you. I'll never forget years ago sitting next to a partner at a huge firm that is almost impossible to make partner at, that joined a satellite office of a firm and became an expert in helping pharmaceutical companies that made a certain type of drug do merger transactions, like some drug class. Could have been, I don't know what it was, heart medicine. I don't know, but it's something quite specialized, not as specialized as heart medicine, but something like that, and became a partner because all the countries and all the companies in that space would look for someone and they would come to them. Thinking about this as well, I remember someone that I was on a meeting with, who is it? Marvin Hagler? No, I don't know who's the big boxer right now? Floyd Merriweather. He's got a chain of boxing gyms or something right now. And I was in a meeting with someone that was in charge of those. And then I was on a meeting with other people that were working on franchise and related stuff. I would have franchises. And when they mentioned an attorney, the same person came up again and again at a firm in Los Angeles. But people from all over the country were using that person because he was a go-to person for franchising law. Think about that. This is how things work. And this is just another example, but between 1997 and probably almost 2001, like November of 2000, it seemed like anybody that could make a lot of money on the internet. And it was called kind of land grabbing. And people during that time were making a lot of money. And at the same time, others that were trying to make money were losing massive amounts of money. But think about it. There were people during that time that were actually making a lot of money. And what these people were doing is Very early on, it became apparent that the people that were making money were selling specialized products. They were selling bird cages for small birds. Other people might be selling bird cages for large birds. They were selling replacement batteries for cell phones. They were selling Palm Pilot cases, which are big back then. Just things that were very specialized. Dog leashes. Who would think that you'd have a business selling dog leashes? But things like that were just very specialized. And those people were all making a killing. I remember someone coming over to my house with his son in, I don't know, the 2004 or something. And he had a friend that was importing, phone cases from China or something like that. And just had a website selling phone cases for Nokia phones or something, and was making millions of dollars a year with this little website. So they wanted to copy the idea and do the same thing. A lot of times just having a niche on the internet was a huge way to make money. Now, it doesn't work anymore with Amazon and things like that. But again, if you need a bird cage and search for a person selling those, you'd always want to use a person who appeared to be an expert. And it might be the only type of person you need. If you need an attorney to help you with the regulations of franchise law, like the one I told you about earlier, you're going to want someone who appears to be an expert in that, especially if there's only one attorney in your neighborhood doing this. The specialist usually gets the business. I remember I moved to this nice house in this nice neighborhood years ago, and there was this attorney who had retired in his early 50s and had bought this multi-million-dollar house. It wasn't on my street. But it was near me. And I don't know, I went to some dinner with him, and he said, "Did you know that every Kawasaki Ninja built between 1984 and 1992 has been totaled?" And he was a motorcycle accident lawyer. And one of the only people that did that. He did so well at it. He retired early in his career. Meaning, I don't know, but think about it, retiring in his early 50s. This is what happens. People that do very well are often the specialists. It could be motorcycle accidents on Kawasaki Ninjas. I don't know, but anything. So if you want to get work, you need to figure out how to make yourself and your practice area seem very specialized. And being specialized is what people want. People want to use experts. They don't want to use, if you have a problem with your lungs, you're going to go to a lung doctor. If you have a problem with your heart, you're going to go to a heart doctor. If you're charged with a serious crime, you're going to go to a criminal defense lawyer. If you're anything that potentially happens to you, you're going to want to have an expert. If you're charged with a homicide, killing someone, and it's just completely made up, you're going to do everything you can to find the best expert possible. It's like that for clients as well. It doesn't matter. If you do whatever your practice area is, any practice area has a specialty. So one of the things I used to believe is that attorneys from accounting firms, for example, would have a hard time getting a job with a law firm because typically, the accounting firms aren't law firms. They don't pay as much. There are people that get jobs with them often don't get jobs in law firms because there are hardly any tax law jobs out there. But then I realized, wait a minute, if the person is an international tax lawyer in an accounting firm, there are law firms that are seeking specifically international tax lawyers. And so I've been able to place them. If they're an employee benefits lawyer inside of an accounting firm, they're placeable too. If they're an M&A lawyer, sometimes placeable. So, but the generalist tax attorney in an accounting firm is not placeable in a law firm. So anything you want to do, if you want to be placeable, if you want to be marketable, if you want to get jobs, if you want to get business, you need to be specialized. There's nothing more important than being specialized. And very few people are. Most people think that doing a lot of things makes them more marketable. The opposite thing is true. Most people think that being able to do a lot of work on different types of clients makes them more marketable, but able to get business. No, clients want experts. You would too. Think about it if you're a client. Would you want someone who's going to need to learn and do R&D to figure out a practice area and to figure out your case, or someone that understands everything instantly? You would want someone that understands everything and very quickly. Some attorneys now in New York and other things are charging in excess of $2,000 an hour for their services. Is that right? I don't know, but it sure as hell is if they can cut through things and come up with a very good solution very quickly on some complicated venture capital transaction, then they're actually worth it. It's like that with doctors. I know one doctor that I went to college with that does this very specialized pediatric type of operation that he charges several $100,000s to do. And he has people flying to see him all over the world. because he's a specialist in that. And he's the only person that does it. I know another woman that is very smart. She went to a very incredible Ivy League college and was at the top of her class, and then went to another equally awesome law school or college, or I'm sorry, medical school was the top of her class, and then did all these specialist related work and basically fellowships and things, and basically having babies give birth, helping mothers give birth, and which is what it cut down to. And she's flown around to given hundreds of thousands of dollars to go show up in Saudi royal families and people want to hire the best people they possibly can. And if you look like a specialist and you look like a good specialist, they're going to want to hire you. And I don't know how much more to emphasize this. I try to say it every week. I say it every week because it's so important. But this is also how you get business. And then the other thing, I brought this up earlier and I've talked about it today, but you also need to be familiar with others to get business and clients. So what does that mean? If people are going to do business with you and choose you as an attorney, you need to be familiar, meaning very familiar. This means things like they make phone calls to you on your birthday. It means that you're sending out letters and newsletters and things frequently, or you're getting in touch with them. It means things like forwarding articles of interest. So if you read something potentially from a client that looks interesting, that would help a client, you forward them and you see something that looks interesting to them. People love that. They love thinking that you're thinking of them. And they love hearing from you. They love newsletters. They love notes. They love all this stuff. Then it means going out of your way to let people know you're there and to let people know that they can rely on you and that you can help them and that you're there. You're not just off in the distance. See, very few people do this. Like, why do you think brands like Coca-Cola and Home Depot, all these companies are advertising all the time? Car companies, local dealerships. What is the point? If you open your mailbox every day, there's tons of like spam letters in there that you're never going to read. Like, why do you think people do that? If I contacted you in the past with emails and newsletters and things, why am I doing that? I'm not trying to upset you. I'm basically trying to let people know that you're there. So in order to let people know you're there, it's important that you make as much contact with them as you possibly can, meaning you have to be top of mind and you have to have the most awareness of anybody in order for them to think of you. If you are a labor and employment attorney and you're sending out alerts about issues in labor and employment law all the time to people and to different people, that's going to get their attention and they're going to think about you when they need a labor and employment attorney. If you're a patent attorney and you send updates in patent law to all your potential clients, you're going to be the one seen. No one, by the way, does this. Some people do, but most people don't. They just think that because they're this or because they're that, clients should show up at their door and give them work, and that's all there is to it. But no, if you want to get work, you have to let people know you're there. Again, I told you earlier about one of the most successful attorneys in Los Angeles with this giant book of $30, $40, $50 million. And from the time this person was an associate, like meaning 2 or 3 years out, they would go or he would go and make sure he worked 2,500 hours a year on his clients. And then he got a driver. Now think about this. Like, you're out of school for 3 or 4 years and you get a driver, and he decided he was going to spend equal amount of time, if not more, developing business. So he had his driver just drive him around and just meet with potential clients or people that could be potential business in his free time. This is all he did. And he found himself, by the way, this is very funny because he worked so hard. He found himself 15 years out, partner in a big law firm, making millions and millions of dollars, but still living in a house he bought as a first-year associate because he was spending so much time and his emphasis was on getting business. But again, this is the number one probably business generator in LA. But that meeting with people like that was letting people know that you're out there. When I was a young attorney getting business, and I told you about this earlier, the story at the beginning of the webinar, but the process of writing down the names of everyone and just making contact with them consistently. This, by the way, can make you president of the United States. This is what Bill Clinton did. Bill Clinton wrote down, kept index cards from the time he was a young a man, meaning in college, I'm assuming, of every single person he ever met. and he wrote down every single thing he ever could about them. And then he took these index cards and constantly reviewed them and looked over them. And you could meet someone 30 years later and know their first name and ask them about their family and what happened to such and such. This is what people do, by the way, that generate huge books of business and get the nation behind them. They do this. Do you think Donald Trump could have been president if he hadn't been on, I don't know, the Boss or whatever the shows he was on and did all that? No, he became familiar. He wrote books. He telling people how to be successful. So regardless of whether or not you agree with his political philosophies, he became familiar to the entire country. So this is what people do. It's also what Bill Clinton did in another way. People do that. How did Barack Obama burst onto the scene? One of the things that helped him was Oprah, who had a very big channel. He went on there, and so this is how people get known, and this is how things work. I think it still worked with Meghan Markle, and so it's going on Oprah. Getting your name out there, being familiar is huge. And again, this making sure that people know you, staying in touch with them. And this is another one I read called The Referral of a Lifetime. It's a good book. I recommend reviewing it. And again, I'm almost done with this webinar because this has been a long webinar so far, but this part of the webinar will take questions. But this particular book focuses on a very similar system, and basically it'll help you get clients. It can also help you get a job. And basically what this book says is it says the same thing. You write down the name of the people and you stay familiar with them. And then once you get clients, you also need to stay and be familiar. Everybody, if you're familiar, then you're the person that comes to mind. So why do people come to BCG? Is it because it's just sitting around there? And people come to companies because they're familiar. People use attorneys because they're familiar. People do all these things and they use people that are familiar. Being familiar means you need to be in touch with people. You need to be out there to be seen. You need to be communicating with people, sending them articles and sending them different things. You need to be seen as someone that cares about them, that's interested in them. And I'll be the first to tell you that I've made a lot of mistakes not doing this enough or doing it improperly. So you need to be familiar with people to the extent you can. And I'll say that over and over again, but honestly, I think that is one of the most important possible things you can do. And then if you're not interested in doing a lot of the work, but you want a title like counsel or something, which again isn't bad, to make it appear if they're working, to keep your options open, you may often be better off in a smaller firm. And I'll tell you why in a minute. You should really do everything you can as an attorney to learn about marketing. So most people don't learn about marketing. You don't need to learn. You should try to absorb information about marketing. You should realize how important marketing is. You should really think about the world from a marketing mindset, because attorneys don't always think about things in a marketing mindset. Attorneys are taught to take apart arguments, to be critical, to take a side and then to argue that side. But you need to really learn whatever you can to be really a first-rate marketer, to at least know about it. Now, I'm not saying you should just pick up any random book and read about marketing, but you should be interested in certain topics of marketing. So if you go to a bookstore or you go onto Amazon or something, you type in marketing, what type of topics are you interested in? I'm not saying you should read every book, but you should try to read certain topics that you might be interested in. And what I mean by that is you study marketing in the way that suits them. So maybe your idea of marketing is meeting new people. Maybe your idea of marketing is writing books and reports. Maybe your idea of marketing is getting referrals. Different people have different aspects of marketing they're interested in, but you should try to read and study things about marketing that you're interested in. And the more you study marketing, the better you're going to become at it. Every form of marketing there is can translate into getting legal clients. Every type of marketing you can do. Copywriting could assist you in writing letters to clients. You need to learn and study some form of marketing, at least learn what it is, because learning about marketing, what does it mean? Like someone comes to you and a client comes to you and asks for help and you say, no, I can't help you, but there's this person who can help you, but you stay in touch with them. And in case they ever have a need, there's just all sorts of tricks and things that people do with marketing. And a really good marketer is rare, but just learning about different marketing things, trying them out, thinking about the world from a marketing standpoint is very useful and something you should do. And this, I think, is the last part of the webinar. It's about attorneys to get business, don't quit. Keeping in mind that one big client or several clients can change your life and your entire practice of law. You need to have a strategy in which you're resilient and always looking for clients. What does that mean? I remember once it used to be a big deal to put an advertisement in a magazine called American Lawyer. It cost, I don't know, back then, $10,000 or something. And I remember I started taking out ads for BCG in these big magazines and things. And someone came and I remember I was my best friend's wife who saw the ad and she's, wow, did you get a lot of business from that? And I thought about it. No, I didn't get any business. Probably, maybe I did, but I don't think I did. And so the idea is that if you have a strategy, you're always looking for clients and you don't take, just because something doesn't work, you don't take no for an answer. Oftentimes you need to try something 100 times before it'll work, or even 1,000 times, but eventually it will work. And every time you try some marketing thing and it doesn't work, it doesn't mean you should expect instant results. You're going to get business and everything's going to work as you become more familiar and the more you try it. And right off the bat, I want to say one thing. Some of the attorneys with the most business are not someone that you would think is cool by any stretch of the imagination. As a matter of fact, I remember Bill Urquhart, who's no longer alive, but one of the founders of Quinn Emanuel, said the guy with the most business in LA, the best rainmaker, is also the biggest nerd in LA. You don't have to have any type of, you don't have to think you're cool. You don't have to look a certain way or act a certain way in terms of, it's just, you don't have to be extroverted. You don't have to be, you can be introverted. But in order to do business, you need to take action. You need to continually be pushing forward. And you also need not to give up. Every day, by the way, regardless of what you do, you will get negative feedback from the world. People will tell you you're wrong. People will attack you. People will undermine you. People will make you question yourself. You will make mistakes, and people will try to make you think that they're worse than they are. Think about, again, what politicians go through, people trying to impeach them and people suing them and people, think about all this. Think about what companies go through with people boycotting them and their business going down because of a mistake in who their sponsor is. Every person, every business that becomes successful goes through a lot. They're questioned, or they make mistakes, they fall down, they go to jail. Look at Martha Stewart, jail, and all these people, and then or prison and coming back. So people make mistakes all the time. And oftentimes relationships can take years to develop. And so just because you talk to someone and you don't get business right away, this is how, no, you just keep trying and trying and you don't give up. And you realize, why wouldn't you keep trying? Because most people give up. Most people don't keep trying to get business. Most people stop. And then when they stop, then they lose. And so you just need to keep trying. And so the person that keeps trying is the person that ultimately wins. It's like the tortoise and the hare. Certain people don't keep trying, but if you go into your profession or into the legal profession, whether it's you're a law student, or whether you're a first-year attorney, or whether you're a 10th-year attorney, you go into the legal profession and you decide that, hey, this is important. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to stick with it. And eventually, I'm going to hope eventually something's going to come with it. Well, people do not disrespect people that are committed to their profession and sending others news and trying to help others and doing all the things that I'm recommending. But you have to do it and you have to keep doing it and you can't stop. It's not just something that you start and then if it doesn't work out, you quit and try something different. You need to keep going. And you need to realize that the rewards of this are your freedom and your income and your family's pride in you and your ability to support yourself, your ability to retire when all of these things are what you get when you keep doing it. And very few people do. Most people give up. Most people are like, oh, I put all my effort into working long hours and it was really tough and I didn't make partners, whatever. I'm going to go in house. I'm going to do. No, you start now and you don't give up. Like this is all you need to do. You take everything that I've talked to you about today and you put it into practice and you do everything you can to do the best you possibly can, to not give up, to recommend to keep going, because and it doesn't matter if you're starting late, because if you don't start somewhere, you'll be nowhere. So what does that mean? That means that you keep trying, you keep pushing forward. You don't give up. You give everything you can to doing the best job you can, to learning all this stuff and to making mistakes. And again, I will be 100% honest with you that once you start trying to do this stuff, you're going to be embarrassed. Clients are going to blow you off and think, oh, he's trying to get business from me or she's trying to get business. People will treat you poorly. I get treated poorly all the time, not because I'm a horrible person, but because I catch people at the wrong time. Some people have personal issues or issues, who knows? But if you allow people to bring you down, then they will. And it's the same thing with getting business. If you allow yourself to get discouraged, and then you will. It's the people that keep fighting and they keep picking themselves up and learning lessons and trying harder the next time that do well. And I'm trying to give you a pep talk here because I know that 90% of you probably believes and understands what I'm saying. But I also know that a significant percentage of you won't do this because you won't start and then if you do start, you won't commit. So what does that mean? It means that a lot of people are what are called dabblers. And what is a dabbler? A dabbler is someone that starts doing one thing, like they'll try tennis and they'll do it for a while and then they'll quit. Or they'll decide, hey, I'm going to learn a new language, and then they'll try it for a while and then they'll quit. Or, hey, I'm going to try to write a book, and they'll do that for a while and they'll quit. So you can be a dabbler in a lot of things. The thing about being a dabbler is if you want to learn how to play tennis, you'll start playing tennis and then it'll be a little tough, and then you'll have this peak where you learn a lot when you get better, but then your next progress will be very slow. And that's where most people quit. They like the thrill of trying something new. And then so people give up. People give up romantically. They have a couple of bad experiences and they say, oh, I don't want to date anymore. Or they have bad experiences with whatever, working in a law firm. They say, I'm giving up on law firms. And if something bad happens, so you can't quit. You have to keep trying. And there's nothing more important than that. Again, the highest level, the attorneys that are the happiest are good business generators. And a lot of them hardly practice law at all. They bring in their finders, and then the grinders do the work, and the minders watch the people doing the work. And the people like in a lot of law firms, they have, I'm sure you've seen this, retired senators or judges or political figures or people, and they're often used more for their name recognition and business generation ability than their desire to practice law. But this is one of the final points I'm going to make. I'm going to have a few more minutes, and before we get to questions, but I want to make a point that I think is very disturbing, and it's something that I hope you'll listen to and will change your life. It may not, it may, but when I first became a legal recruiter and got a reputation that was good in the industry, and why did I get that reputation? It's because I cared about it and I was enthusiastic, and no one else out there was. It was literally like when I started, there were no recruiting firms that wrote articles. They just said, we're this exclusive firm and you should hire us if you need a job and we're the best. And then you call them and you would get a voicemail. But I started getting very enthusiastic about this job because I knew this is my life. If I don't achieve something with this and I don't do the best I can, then my life is going to suck. And I knew that. And I knew I liked to do this, but I knew that if I didn't put everything I had into what I'm doing, that my life would suck. So I didn't have the option. And you don't either, by the way. You don't have the option. If you want to have a good life and a good career where there's safety and where your family has safety and where you can do the things you want with your time and where people seek you out and where you have clients banging on your door, you can do that. Or you can choose a life that's not what you want. It's up to you. And maybe that's what you want, but you have the option if you want to step up and really have a good career. So when I first became a legal recruiter, I started getting all these calls and requests for meetings with partners of law firms who wanted to move. And I was young. Okay. So keep in mind, I'm, 20s, like late 20s or something. And all these calls from partners and things. And back then and now, for most part, what the belief is that for a recruiter to place a partner, the partner generally needs to have enough business to sustain themselves, meaning around 3 to 4 times their salary and a large history of having a large amount of business. So what does that mean? That means that if you want to bet with a partner, and same thing kind of today, again, there's a lot of exceptions to this, and I'm a specialist in exceptions, but it means if you want to make $500,000 as an attorney in a law firm, as a partner, you probably need to have somewhere between $1.5 million and $2 million in business. And if you want to make $1 million, you need to have $3 to $4 million. It's just how it works. And you also need a history of it. So before any law firm is going to agree to pay you $1 million a year, they're going to want to say, hey, does this person have a history of doing this. Now, of course, associates can make a lot of money. Some firms, they can make close to, it's true, I mean, 800,000 or more, but it doesn't last unless you eventually generate business. So the idea, if you want to make 3,000, this is the rule back then, this we're talking about a lot less money. But if a partner wanted to make $300,000 a year, they would need $1 million in business and so forth. And that's just the way it is. A lot of the calls that I received early in my career were from partners who didn't know how to get clients in their law firm and had generated very little or no business. A lot of them were older. A lot of them had children that were in school. A lot of them have been practicing for 25 years or so. In a lot of cases, what was scary to me, and I'll just be completely frank with you, because this is what blew my mind, and it just blew my mind. You would have partners in some of the biggest law firms in the country. Now, I'm not talking about your super prestigious law firms, your big New York firms and things, but firms maybe that were big firms, but not the top tier firms, but the big firms. I saw partners that were being paid less than first year associates and with no business. And when I first started, I'd be like, wow, this partner, this big firm is contacting me. I'm going to help them, and I'm going to drop these documents off at their house or something. And I'd get there, and I would see that these people were having a very hard time. And I would meet them, and they would look demoralized. They would look unhappy. They would be negative. They would be depressed. You could pick it up. And so every day I hear from partners with no business. Now, I actually can get them jobs now. So I've learned how to do it, and I've learned how to find firms that will hire them, they have firms that will work. But every day there's people like that looking for business, and they don't know what to do, and I can help them. I'm not saying it's hopeless, and I do help them, and I get them positions all the time, but most recruiters don't know how to do that in other firms. And I'm not criticizing them. It's just, this is how deep I'm enthusiastic I am. But in the majority of cases, what happens once someone doesn't have any business, regardless of how they're paid, they wind up in a position where the firm is telling them, hey, we can't afford to pay these kind of legacy people anymore. We need people that have work, that are setting a good example, that are hungry, and so at some point in a lot of cases, and the majority of them, meaning over 50%, maybe higher, these people are told they need to be out of the firm. Now, that doesn't always happen. There are partners that launch on to extremely powerful partners with millions of dollars of business early in their career and are fed work by that person the rest of their career. But in general, this is what happens. And it can be dramatic and very painful. I've seen the results of this. It's affected me personally because it made me very sad. It made me pretty much thinking like, wow, is this what happens when all you do is produce work? This is what the profession does to you. It basically takes away your pride and your happiness and your self-worth and grinds you into nothing. This is what, I'm sorry, but this happens to a lot of people. And then all these people do is they may talk about, oh, I went to this prestigious law school and I'm so proud of it. Or I worked in this big firm early in my career. That's all they have to show. I don't know how much I can tell you how important this stuff is and why you need to do it, but it is everything. If you want to have your self-respect, if you want to not be pushed around, if you want to be paid fairly, if you want to have control over your life, if you want to be proud, if you don't want to be depressed, all these things will happen in a lot of cases if you do not develop business. It's as simple as that. This is your choice. Your choice is between happiness, unhappiness, and really where you're going. And so to do this, I've started all sorts of companies. I've started Law Crossing. Recently I started BCG Reverse Recruiting, where I can help people. And all these things to help people, because for me, like I was like, wow, like you can do really well in college and you can go to a great law school, you can come out and get the best jobs. But if you don't do this particular thing and you don't learn how to do it, and again, no one's going to tell you everything I've told you today, and most of the time, no one's going to sit down with you and spend hours talking to you about it, then you're pretty much in bad shape. So I've started a lot of companies to help people. But the point I want to make is if you don't do this, you're going to be literally at the mercy of others, and you're going to be in a position where they're doing you a favor, keeping you employed as a senior attorney. Think about that. They're doing you a favor, letting you work on their matters. They're doing you a favor, paying you less than an associate, like a senior associate make. They're doing you a favor. So is this what you want for your life? Come on. This is what happens if you don't get business. I don't care if you're at some big firm as an associate making a stratospheric amount of money. This is what awaits you if you don't get business. You can pretend like it's not there. You can bury your hand in the sand like an ostrich with a lion approaching, but you have to make a decision. And a law firm, if you don't have business, they will pay you what they want to. They will let you go when it suits them. And that's it. That's your future. Now you can go in-house. Yes, you can go in-house. But that's the other thing where you're going to be at the mercy of someone. You're going to be at the mercy that there's a merger. You're going to be at the mercy that a new CEO comes in and wants his own legal department or her legal department. You're going to be at the mercy that the company stays relevant. Most of the Fortune 500, when it came out in 1958 or whatever it was, only one or two of those companies are still around. So think about that. Most companies go out of business. When a firm lets a partner go without any business, they really don't have a lot of options. Now, I can find a lot of them jobs because I know what I'm doing, and I know firms that will hire people like them and smaller firms that have business. There's ways to do it. But for the most part, if the lawyer doesn't have a lot of business, then they're going to have a very hard time getting a job in another law firm. And again, going in-house isn't easy. So the most important thing that you can possibly do for your career is learn how to develop business, develop a lot of business early on. And I'm sorry to say this, I really am, but your life and your happiness as an attorney, but as a man or a woman will often largely depend on your ability to do this. And no one's going to help you. And if you don't do this, you're eventually going to be somewhere down the road where you're going to be in bad trouble. You go to law school to empower yourself, but the opposite will happen to you if you don't develop business. Now, you may be very smart and learn how to survive in different organizations and provide value and be in the right practice area. I'm not saying it's hopeless. You could also join a really good in-house job where you have security. There's all sorts of great things that can happen. But for the most part, this is a really big deal. And it's something that is going to impact the entire course of your life. Whether if you do it correctly, it's going to be better. If you don't do it correctly, you're going to have a very hard time. And it's just not good. That's it. My advice to you, my biggest piece of advice is to start learning this stuff now. This webinar will be posted sometime next week if you want to refer back to it. But you need to do this. And again, I'm not paid to tell you this. I don't know most people that are on these webinars. But what I am telling you is if you're an attorney or law student or whatever, you need to learn how to do this. And you need to make sure that this is the number one priority of your life and your career. Because if you don't do that, then you're not gonna be where you want. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be at a big firm. Some of the happiest attorneys out there are at smaller firms and they have business. This doesn't mean you have to have gone to a good law school. None of this is important. The most important thing is you learn how to get business, whatever the heck your practice area is, and you choose a way that you can do that, because that's going to be what your life is about. So I'm going to take a quick break, and then when I come back, I will answer as many questions as everyone has, and I hope you have some. All right, so let's do this. Get to the questions. Give me 1 second. And I do want to I don't know what the word is, but tell everyone that's on this call that I think just even listening to something like this is very important. If you can realize a lot of things I talked about today, you should be proud of yourself, because most people never take the time to learn about this stuff. And if it's presented to them, a lot of times they won't really understand it or really want to listen to it. So it's like when you hear stuff you don't want to listen to, you just tune out and you don't listen to it because you want to feel comfortable where you are. So I would just say that listening to this incredibly smart, because it helps you move into a position where you're confronting information that may not be comfortable. Okay, so last week I had to end a little early. People did ask some more questions about law school GPAs and things. So I will address those today, probably closer to the end of this Q&A. But I do want everyone to know that I will do those questions from last week. And I will start some of these questions here with the ones from this week. Okay, so I'm getting ready to leave my insurance defense firm. My specialty is construction litigation, but my firm, let me make sure I'm sharing. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sharing my screen. But my firm is, let me make sure this person's in, yeah. But my firm makes it difficult to build a book. A growing boutique asked me to join them in the fall because they have more construction work. It is a work in progress. They're getting a team together. I think I could be in a better position to build a book. However, money is a concern, and I haven't talked about money yet with a boutique. There are larger firms in the city that can construction openings now. Should I apply to the larger firms? I know the owner of the boutique and don't want to jeopardize the relationship. I think the boutique has great potential. Okay, so this is a big mistake that a lot of young attorneys make. And the mistake that they're making makes sense. I understand the reasons why they make the mistake. And it doesn't mean that you're making any huge errors or anything. But a lot of what young attorneys think about when they're, and I don't know how young you are, but when they're younger, is things like bad ideas are to prioritize money over experience or long-term. What just happened there? Like long-term happiness and success. What does that mean? But you look at the world and you think, wow, I could do this thing that's prestigious and where I can make a lot of money, and therefore it's smarter for me to do that than prioritize my long-term happiness and success. Is that a good idea? I don't think so. I think that you need to look at every potential opportunity as one that's going to take you closer to your goal. Your goal should be, which I hope if you understood, you asked this question before the webinar was even like a half hour going, but it should be long-term happiness and long-term success. So what does long-term success mean? It means putting yourself in a position where you're likely to have independence, where you're likely to build a book of business, where you're likely to grow. So I think construction litigation is actually a great practice area. I think that's a specialty. I think it's better than insurance defense. I think that there's always a lot of construction work. I think it's easier to get clients because you can approach homeowners associations and real estate developers and all sorts of people for construction related work. So I think construction is probably a better practice area in a lot of respects than it may be to do other practice areas, which should be insurance defense. I think if you can go to a boutique firm where you know the owner, then you might be better off because you have someone to train you and where you could potentially watch what they do and where they're more likely to share information with you and where you're more likely to form positive relationships that can help you the rest of your career. Were it me, I probably would try to work in the boutique firm. I think your goal should always be with any job you take should be your long-term success. I'll tell you just a quick story. It's not that great of a story, but there's this guy that's in this business group with me. He was one of the youngest graduates in history of Harvard Law School, entered college when he was like 15 or something, was living in the dorms. It was very funny. Very smart guy, and came out and worked at one of these super prestigious firms. I don't know if it was Gibson or O'Malveny, but really good firm in LA. And then after a couple of years of doing that, someone he knew that was older offered him the option to someone that he just knew from his community, ethnic community, offered him a position to start a personal injury law firm with him. And he did and became incredibly successful. Walking away from a position at your Gibsons and your O'Malvenys or whatever. I don't know if it was one of those firms. It might have been, I don't know, but a super prestigious firm in order to take a position doing something else where he knew there would be more long-term success and where he had a mentor probably was the best decision for him. So you need to think of everything that you do, like in terms of what is effectively going to lead to the most long-term success. Yeah. As a lawyer seeking to optimize my business development efforts, I'm interested in understanding the extent to which social media can influence client retention and referrals compared to traditional face-to-face interactions. Are there any notable advantages or disadvantages to each approach when it comes to long-term client relationships and generating a steady stream of business? Yes, I'm actually not, and I wish I was. But what's funny is as people get more senior. When I started in this business, all of the recruiters that were older had no idea how to put up web pages and no idea that they would ever have the idea of how to do it. And certainly social media has been around most of my career. but it's not something that I spend a ton of time on. Yes, so I do. I post articles and webinars and things. But the point about social media is, yes, you can generate a lot of business with that. You can be seen because of it, so it helps you be seen. You can get leads. You can publicize different types of work you're doing, different cases. You can get all sorts of information, make all sorts of progress and things in your career by being on social media. So yeah, it's a good thing. But ultimately, the most important thing is face-to-face and relationships. That can make a huge difference. If you're able to become very proficient in creating face-to-face relationships, you're going to be much better off than if you're not able to do that. That's really what I would recommend, is become better at that to the extent you can. But also to do any type of social media marketing you can do. I honestly don't have the time to use them, but I get approached all the time by people that are seeking to just emails and things, optimize LinkedIn profiles or connect to people on LinkedIn and so forth. If you're able to do things like that, it can be very helpful. And so if you can optimize profiles, you can learn sometimes, depending on your practice area, if you're doing like a consumer-facing practice area, which would be something like trust and estates, personal injury, immigration law, definitely you could advertise on Facebook and all these sorts of things. Yes, you can. I think that social media is very important. I also think that a lot of businesses get all of their business from social media. Yes, that's definitely something that you should understand and become an expert in if you want to get business. I do believe, though, that ultimately, if you want to get the best and highest paid business, which would be from companies and things, you're often going to be much better off networking with people outside of social media. Thank you. So yeah, the slideshows, thank you. I do think we upload those, but I'll check on that. If we don't upload the slideshows, someone asked about that, then I will do my best to make sure that those are uploaded. They should actually be uploaded in the area where the webinars are posted online. What strategies would you recommend for striking a balance between quality and quantity in management in order to build a large book of business? Most books of business start with individual personal relationships with people. And then those people, if you do a good job or you become seen as an expert, will recommend business from there. So what that means is your initial clients, you need to have the best business with. And then after you move away from those initial clients, you need to, when your new additional clients come in, you need to keep up those relationships and to build up a book of business. Staying loyal to your individual clients, being careful about taking on too much clients. And then it gets into things like hiring associates, where you can get more senior, or having other people do the work. And look, this is a big question mark in terms of what you're doing. One of the things I think is interesting, and I'll just bring this up, and I know I've talked a lot about personal injury and things on this call, but most personal injury attorneys will settle 5 to 99% of the cases. Very little goes to trial. The same thing with divorces. Most 97 to 99% of divorces. So what does that mean? It means that a lot of times people will take on different matters, which would be personal injury and other things, with the idea that things are going to likely settle. And if things are settling, then that's what's going on. And then they'll do a lot of quantity in order to get a lot of settlement. The bigger the client is, really the better off you need to be in terms of what you're doing with the quality of the work you do. So the biggest clients need the most quality. What's interesting about this question is that when you talk about a lot of the best law firms, so if you go to some of the top AmLaw 100 law firms, what's going to happen is everything is about quality. So they will do everything they possibly can to provide the best quality work. And that's just how they operate, trying to do the absolute best work they can. So it's just something to think about in terms of your practice and really what you need to do in terms of providing different types of work. Okay, let's see here. So this question. Okay, there's often a struggle to balance billable hours with business development activities. How can an attorney so you need to figure out how to basically prioritize billable hours with business development wherever you're working. Meaning, if you need to work 2,500 hours someplace, or 2,000, then you need to try to put in as much hours doing the actual business development as you can. You can certainly hack business development, meaning try to do webinars or online Zoom meetings and things instead of traveling. But most of the time, meeting potential clients individually, spending time with them, has much better rewards than not doing something and not forming those personal relationships. So everybody wants personal relationships, and really getting out there and doing that is important. There's why personal relationships. It's most of the time when people are out in the world, they don't look at things. They don't feel like a relationship. They don't get a relationship with the people that are giving them the work in their firms. Many times they don't get a relationship with people they do business with. They don't get a relationship with anybody. So if you can form relationships with people, that's often going to be a very important thing to being able to get business. And the more relationships and the stronger the relationships you have, the more business you're going to be able to get. Yeah, so alternative billing strategies can often attract a lot of different types of clients. The problem with alternative billing strategies is that a lot of times, sometimes people will do things like they'll say, you can flat rate billing, they'll have it say, oh, if you pay me $100,000 a year, I'll represent whatever you need, or they'll say flat rate billing and things. But what the big thing to understand, I think, and this is really important, is there used to be in the legal profession that attorneys wouldn't necessarily, they would bill based on things. So they would say a will is $500, a corporate transaction of this type is $10,000. But this is literally what was happening. And then some studies were done that if people billed by the hour, they would make more money. And so all these studies happened where it was determined that the best thing for an attorney would be to bill by the hour, and unless it was a contingency type case. So billing by the hour was really the most important thing for the attorney. And if the attorney did that, they would be likely to make more money. So that's really how things went. So in terms of what I'm talking about with you, I would recommend trying to maximize whatever billing strategy you think is going to work for you, but keeping in mind that the most effective method of billing is often billing by the hour, or in the contingency matter. Obviously, that attracts a lot of clients to do that and can increase your business. A final matter that I wanted to bring up, if you're like a solo practitioner or something and trying to bill by the hour, one of the hardest things for solo practitioners and attorneys working in small firms is actually getting paid by their clients. So people think, oh, if I bill the client this much, I'm going to get paid, but it's actually very hard to get paid. I remember talking to the son of a well-known attorney that had his own practice, basically representing very wealthy real estate developers in LA. And he'd bill them his rate, but if he got 60% of the amount of what he billed, he was happy to get it. So it's just something to keep in mind. Okay, so this is a good question. This person says, let's see, in your perspective, is it possible for an attorney to be too specialized to the point where they max your limit? Yes, of course. So like anything, you want to go into a practice and to do something where you're not necessarily going to be, where you're not limiting your opportunities. And so what does that mean? It means that you can't choose too narrow of a specialty. If you try to be a corporate M&A attorney in a small town in Wisconsin, that's probably not a good thing for you. So what do attorneys do in small towns in Wisconsin? They do everything. They might do corporate and litigation or family law. And this is what people do in small towns. In large markets where there's more people and where more needs for specialists, they can do that. But I know an attorney that became very successful in the Bay Area just doing software service agreements. And that's something that can be done. So you just need to try to put yourself in practice areas where you're able to get business and look like a specialist without being too specialized for the market that you're in. What would be a specialist? A specialist would be trust and estates. A specialist could be commercial litigation as a specialist, but not that specialized. You have to choose your specialty based on the market you're in. Sometimes attorneys in big markets are too specialized. In a big New York firm, some of them, that people might be an expert in one aspect of a corporate type deal. And I've seen attorneys where they have experience that's so specialized, when they get out, there's only like one or two firms in the country that do that. The nice thing about that is that if they do have that specialty, they often have a very good chance of getting hired, but again, not always the case. Okay, this is interesting. Okay. And if you use your name in these questions, I never show your name. So that's why sometimes I show the question on time. Most of my 20-year diversion from law practice has been in online marketing and develop expertise in lead generation and WordPress development and marketing funnels. Wow. That's awesome. So if I was you, there's a huge business in helping attorneys with all this type of online marketing. There are companies and individuals that do nothing but that. I would think with that experience, you could have a huge business, a very successful business that would, if you scale it, would be more profitable than any type of business, other type of business that you could probably do practicing law. So what does that mean? When the website FindLaw, it used to became very profitable by building websites for attorneys that then license to them, which is very funny, which anybody can build a website, but licensing one is even more ridiculous. Learning how to build to help attorneys with marketing, there's a huge market for that. Just in BCG alone, we work with over 25,000 law firms. And this doesn't include solo practitioners, which I'm sure would take it to hundreds of thousands. So what a great skill to be able to be an expert in online marketing and an attorney and apply that to things. What are some good venues? You could organize contact all the solo practitioners in a city and do a presentation about marketing, or you could contact all the small firms, or there's so many options. It is a great idea. I think with that expertise, you could start a multi-million-dollar business or a very successful business where you wouldn't have to, there's a ton of demand for that. So I think that's a great question. Marketing book. Okay, so someone asked about the name of the marketing book. So it wasn't a marketing book. I think it was called, there's one, Never Send a Resume. It's another one. I never mentioned that. That's a good book. There's another one called The Referral of a Lifetime or something. There's just a lot of really good marketing books out there that you can find. I like a guy named Jay Abraham. I haven't read his stuff, and he's one of my, I know him personally, but I don't know if I'd call him a mentor, but I called him that. But he's written a lot of books. I think he called some Marketing Machine or something, but he wrote a book that was one of his first books that was really good. And there's just a lot of marketing books out there. There's a book called Influence, I think, by Jack Reeves and Trout or something. And Reeves, I don't know how to spell it, called Influence. And so just starting, and that's a really good book. I think he's a professor at ASU or something. So there's just a lot of good books out there. My advice to you would be to, when you look for books and things, to find ones that interest you. And then once you find books that interest you, then read those. I don't know that you necessarily need to find any type of specific book, but you just need to find things that interest you, because if you're interested in them, then you'll do them. And those can lead you to other things you're interested in. But these are books that I like. I like these books. These aren't really marketing books. It's just, they talk about how to get work and how to, basically they're about applying for jobs and things, but getting referrals. But I like those books. Okay, so this is a good question. This is the kind of question that a lot of people have, especially attorneys. How can I effectively communicate the value of my legal expertise without sounding too self-promotional or boastful? So this is in lawyers, it's ingrained that part of it is in the DNA of the profession. It used to be illegal for lawyers to advertise. I don't know why that would be, but it used to be illegal. So there's this kind of thing where old lawyers and existing lawyers are always afraid to advertise and be seen. So how do you communicate the value of your expertise to potential clients? The best way of doing that is really to talk about what you do, and necessarily not in a way where you're talking about yourself. You can forward articles, you can write, you can send newsletters from the practice area about things. You can check in with them and see how they're doing, and really and if you do things that way, you're not necessarily going to sound too promotional. You'll just sound like someone who's interested in the subject matter, and leave it at that. You don't have to be self-promotion or boastful. It's not boastful to forward information to people or to follow up. One of the things that's fun, and if you're just like a junior associate, there's nothing wrong with sending an article to a client that you're dealing with. There's nothing wrong with, and that's not undermining anybody you're working with. There's nothing wrong with being enthusiastic with a client. There's nothing wrong with talking to other people in the business, and you just need to get out there at some point. One of the things that's most interesting to me about the best CEOs and the best that I've met, and I've met a lot of very, very powerful CEOs and things, like just random events. And I knew nothing about them. Someone told me later who they were, and I found out later, but they were like some of the nicest people. And they always had a story that they would tell about themselves or something that didn't sound too off-putting. They would be like, oh, I've always been interested in. I met this one guy. He talked about, how he was interested in the brain and how decisions are made and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, whatever. But he was very friendly and trying to connect. I was like, oh, you should come by and see my company. And it turned out his company was a huge company that he sold for $500 million. But a very sophisticated business person that just comes across as the most professional and the most easygoing and nice person imaginable. And this is how a lot of the most successful people are. And not in all settings, like investment bankers, not necessarily. But it depends. But some of the nicest people that connect with people are just have a story that you remember them by, and they're very nice. And so that's one of the ways I think that people can do that. Ethical considerations. I'm sure there are ethical considerations, but there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with approaching people about potentially just talking to them. And one of the things that this is an interesting question, but I think is important, is approaching future clients. So when you approach people, you can do it in a couple of different ways. You can approach them saying, hey, can I represent you? Or you can approach them saying, is there any information I can provide you? Do you want to, I saw you're doing this. This is what I do. I can help you. This is what you should do. So that's one way to approach people. And that particular way of approaching people is a lot more effective than just asking for business. So in order to get a client, you typically need to give something before you receive something. And so that's one of the things that I typically recommend doing. You try to give something to people before you ask for something. You don't ask for anything. You just give and you give. And then eventually people will want to give back to you. One of the things is a business thing that I understood very early in my career, and I wish I'd continued to do it. I used to publish this book every year, law review admission or something, and what do grades mean at the top 20 law schools or top 50 law schools. And it was this book that we just wrote over and over again every year. And it used to cost tens of thousands of dollars to mail out to firms. And we just gave it to anybody. It didn't matter if they were a business or a client. We just printed all these tens of thousands of copies of this. But did it work directly? No. No one called up and said, hey, I want you to be our choice recruiting firm because you sent me this book. No, what happened though is because of that book, law firms started respecting us, and then we became experts and they asked us questions. And so all that sort of thing, you can approach people in all sorts of different ways, but there's nothing unethical about providing information or things. That's the worst thing that could happen is someone could slap you down or whatever, but I don't think there's anything ethical problems about that. Okay, these are some questions. And so the more people have more questions, by the way, about getting business, I'm happy to answer them. I did want to answer some of these questions that people had last week because I had to leave earlier. What are the thoughts on presenting law firms with the argument that your overall grade point average is not at par with the firm's candidate expectations? The course is directly, practice here are the best grades the candidate has, thereby providing evidence that the candidate does have the academic evidence. Pretty much, no, it's not going to be that helpful, but it might be. If you want to be a corporate attorney and you have all A's in corporate or something, and you can highlight that maybe in your letter or on your resume. But the thing with grades in law school, and it's pretty much always been this way, is the only thing that the law firms really care about is your grades when you're competing with everyone else in the same level playing field. And so what does that mean? That means in your first year of law school, everyone's taking the same required courses. So how do you stack up compared to that? That's why they interview people for summer associates, and all these jobs and stuff happen after your first year, because after that, you can take any course that you want that's interesting to you. You can take a course about what is the law like in sub-Saharan Africa, or what does it mean to be a lawyer in the 21st century in a small town. You can take these weird courses that are frankly, where there's not a lot of competition. But when you're competing with everyone else for the same grades, that's what the law firms care about. Unfortunately, after your first year, your grades don't mean as much because you're competing with people. I've seen some really weird class. I took some classes that were just ridiculous. I took one practicing law in the information age and just things like that, or anthropological ones like how does tax law serve the poor? Just different practice classes that aren't where that there's not the same sort of competition and curves for the best grades. So that is one as well. I don't think it matters if you got a good grade in certain classes. Okay, so grades are related to your standing in your class. When I graduated from the University of Virginia Law School, they put 80% of the class, or something like that, of the class fell between a 2.9 and a 3.1. And so you look at that today and you say, that's horrible. But then they move, and then they would say, oh, this is what all of our students have. But then because of the competition and other law firms, other law schools and everything, then they changed it wherever now. Maybe it's, I don't know what it is. I don't even want to say what it is because I don't know, but it's probably much higher is all I can say. When I graduated from the University of Chicago, this is the college, okay, University of Chicago, the average grade point was like something ridiculous. It was like a 2.3 to a 2.5 or I don't know, 2.7, something like it sounds very low. When you think about it, like C plus, B minus, I don't know, whatever it was. And anyway, that was considered really good. And if you had A minus average, you were like basically like top 1%. So it depends on the school like that you're going to. So grade points really have to do with where you're ranking based on those grades. And so the law firms care more about that. But if you get a 3.7 and that puts you in the top 50% of your class, you have a 3.7. But that's all you need to do. But you don't necessarily need to worry too much about what your grades are. You don't need to put up your GPA unless it means something. Okay, here's a good question from last week from someone I recognize. Their name is also on this call. The good news is if I don't get to questions the previous week, if I have to leave early, I do them the next week. What advice do you have for lawyers who took a long hiatus of practice and either want to re-enter practice at a junior level to get good training in a different area than the early experience, even though they're in age? Good academics, but decades ago. Okay, so this is something I go over in every call, but I'll do it. But again, it always applies to different situations. I'm not saying anybody's asking. So the idea, so as someone gets more senior, the reason there's a lot of prejudice against senior attorneys in law firms. As attorneys, and it's frankly in outside of law firms as well. So as an attorney gets more senior, unless they continue with the practice of law and they show commitment and they've learned something, the odds are that if they're hired back, they're not going to stick with it. They're going to be harder to train, and they got out of the practice of law for some reason to begin with. But even if all this stuff is answered, the problem is then, are they likely to stick with it? Are they be able to be managed by people that are younger than them? Are they going to have the same drive and enthusiasm as they might have had as a younger attorney? All these sorts of things factor in. And because there's so many factors that are stacked against you, the answer generally is no. Like, why would we be willing to take a chance? Why would we give this person a second career? Why would we do this when there's plenty of others that really want to do the exact same sort of work and will do it at a reasonable cost and so forth? That's really one of the big things that you're up against. So if you can get beyond all that and get hired, which you can, the problem is you have to choose the type of firm that's going to hire you. So you have firms that are really lowest paid and least consumer facing and will hire you if you're willing to work. So these are your least prestigious firms. Then you have still lower paid, low paid. Some work for companies, lowest fees and salary. All right. Maybe a bit higher than five, maybe a bit higher. And this is, I've come up with this thing over time, but maybe a bit higher. One firm. And then you get into this, you get size mid-sized firms, firms that do most of their work, do most work for companies. And then you get into the, which are, I would say, if you look at five of the most prestigious top one half, top hat, 1/2 of 1%, something really crazy, jobs. And then you get into and the reason I'm showing everyone this is just because and this is your AmLaw 100, 200 firms, or, very prestigious boutiques. So this is how all these firms break down. It's not that important to understand, but it is important to understand if you want to get a job. So if you have all these factors weighing against you, meaning whatever your law school, time off, not stability, whatever, trying to change practice areas, whatever the issue is, you're going to have to settle for something less than you might not normally get. And then here at the very bottom would be, no one will hire you, which should be, you need to start your own practice, which is one option too. So let's just call it, I guess we call it a zero, not in a negative way, but just your last option. So this is just basically the way to think about it. So if you have all these things stacked against you, you're not going to get a position at the most top 1% of all firms. You're not going to get a position at an AmLaw 100 or 200 firm because there's too many people that want to work there. You're probably not going to get a position at a mid-sized firm unless it's in a smaller market. And you might get a position at a 2 firm, but you're probably going to have to, you might get a position at a 1 firm, but you're going to have to look at firms that you normally wouldn't work at. There are firms in LA that will hire someone for $40,000 to $45,000 a year, which sounds ridiculous because it's less than a public school teacher makes over 100. So it doesn't sound good, but this will be where you'll have to start, or you can start your own practice. So the legal profession is not closed to anybody. I mean, having a law degree is basically a license to open your own business or to work in a highly selective industry, an industry where not everyone can do the work. My advice to you would just be to apply to the lowest paid jobs, to maybe even lower, and to do what you can. Now, there's also what I call, and this is just a kind of a final thing that I'll give up to you, but it's arbitrage. So there's what's called geographic arbitrage, which I think is cool. What does that mean? That means that you can try to get jobs in areas where there's not a lot of competition. So what does that mean? Small towns, rural areas, etc., where there's just not a lot of competition. And that's actually a very smart thing to do. So you can arbitrage based on the quality or the prestige level of the firm, or you can geographic arbitrage. The hardest markets to get jobs in, hardest markets are the largest, with the most attorneys. And the easiest are going to be in small towns and things, in rural areas. I tell the story, I think I told it 2 weeks ago, I'll tell it again this week, but what's very interesting is every year we get calls from attorneys in small towns. I almost did it once because it was such a great deal. I was trying to figure out what I'm going to do after I do it. It's when I was recruiting. But we get calls from attorneys in small towns and small markets, and they say things like, retiring, I just need someone to come and take over my practice. I'm like, yeah, wow, you just want someone to take over your practice? I'm like, yeah, we don't care who it is. And it might be some strange area of California or Nevada or in the middle of the desert, but this happens all the time. So you can walk into good situations where you can make a lot of money taking over practice. There's all sorts of things you can do, but you just need to understand that the level of opportunity you're going to get is going to be it's going to be based on what you have to offer and how scarce your skills are. It's just the law of supply and demand. What mistake would you give to mid to low grades in order to differentiate themselves to a position? The way to typically look like the best applicant is to be the best applicant. So that means that you apply, again, smaller markets, smaller towns, or the jobs that other people aren't applying for and are willing to do other types of work that other people won't. So again, it doesn't matter what your grades were in law school. It doesn't matter how well you think you're doing. All your grades means your ability to get a job in a 5 or 4 firm is probably not going to work out for you. Your ability to get a 3 firm in a large city is probably not going to work out for you, but it might in a smaller market. So you just have to work at these lower paid jobs. Now, the good news is, this is for everyone to understand. This may be the final question, I think. But the good news is you can always start out at a 2 firm and move to a 3 firm, and you can probably even move from a 3 firm to a 4 firm if you play your cards right. If you learn how to get business and do all these things, you can even start at a 1 firm and move to a 2 firm, a 3 firm, and 4 firm. I've seen people do it. I've seen people start at a 2 firm and move to a 5 firm. Now, they didn't do it right away. They went to a 2 firm, then a 3 firm, then a 4 firm, and then 5 firm. But it's definitely possible. It's something you can do. So it's something that a lot of people don't understand, but is one of the, to understand. So let me just see here. Okay, here's another question. Sorry, this is a good question. Okay, looks like there's more questions I didn't answer. And I will get to all the questions that you guys answered, or girls, asked today. What methods of business development do you think work best in a niche area of law like international trade? Is it different for smalls or compared to large pension clients? Yeah, so I'm just speaking, I've made certainly international trade compliance placements, but with that, you basically get involved with business groups that have these issues. You join them, you find out, you figure out a niche in a trade compliance, and you put information out there, whether it's articles on social media or on your business website about that. You join groups that might have something to do with that, where you can learn from fellow people in the international trade compliance. You find small clients with issues. You find groups that have them. Maybe it could be people importing stuff from Asia or people importing stuff from Europe or the Middle East. I don't know. But you figure out who those people are and you try to be a resource for them, and you meet with them. There's all sorts of things that you can do. And then you have to be strategic about how you do it. But yeah, just a great question. And I hope that answer is helpful. But the idea is that you always want to go and you want to find people that kind of use the service and where they could be, and then get involved in groups and things that do that. But all of this it's not you go to a cocktail party or one event and expect things to happen. You have to do it over years and years to make things happen. And once you do, then that's where you get the results. I appreciate your transparency and advice. I'm sorry, just a question. I'm a 2020 part-time law school graduate who worked full-time on a corporate governance team while in law school. Experienced in entity formation, deal document drafting, due diligence, etc. My law school GPA was a bit below the 3.0, but I earned A's in all the corporate courses. Curious about your advice. Again, it's the law school GPA isn't really that important. It's something that they're going to look at. But really, just because you did well in some corporate courses, it is helpful and it does show that you have that interest. It's not necessarily something that's going to get you in the door at all firms. But the thing that's interesting and that you should keep in mind is, again, this whole concept of the different types of firms you can work at. So the firms that are going to care most about your grades are ones that you might not be interested in anyway. It's going to be your most prestigious firms, your AmLaw 1-200 firms, and then law firms that may, it's smaller. So it's going to be all of these types of firms. And so this is really what you need to understand is it's different types of firms and different types of firms you can get jobs with. So just because you can't get a job at the largest firms, and I'm not saying it's not possible, it is. And I'll tell you about that in a second. You're probably going to have to start out at a smaller firm with people and accept a lower salary because of whatever you are at this point in time. It doesn't mean you're that point in time later. It just means that you're that point in time right now. You don't have as much. You don't have as much to show for yourself in terms of your what you can offer. So that's all there is to it. It's really where you're at. So you'll have to start probably at a smaller firm. Now, can you get a job at a major AmLaw 100 law firm? Yes, things happen all the time. I met this one, I was a couple of years ago, it was just funny, I was talking to a guy that had graduated from, I don't know, Rutgers or something, and didn't graduate without having a summer associate job, without having been an attorney anywhere, and basically was unemployed, and been unemployed for 6 months. He passed the bar and everything. He used to take his dog to a dog park every day. And one day he started talking to some other guy that had a dog in a dog park, and they met there several times when their dogs were walking around the dog park. And then eventually the guy asked him what he did, and he explained he'd gone to Rutgers and all this stuff had happened. He hadn't got a job. And the guy was like, I'm a hiring partner at this, whatever this huge law firm is. And then it was a big law firm. I don't know the name of it. It was a big AmLaw 100 law firm. And I'd love to bring you in for an interview. And he ended up getting a job in one of the most prestigious firms in the world. So you never know what's going to happen. But in the most cases, if you're not getting in the best firms, it's very dumb to try to knock down doors of places that aren't going to hire you. You just need to find a place that has some corporate work that will hire you. And it may be looking at a smaller market. It may be looking in the suburbs outside of a major city. It may be targeting the right people, but that's all you have to do. Law firms aren't interested in whether or not you meet their GPA requirements, because they can hire people that meet their GPA requirements all day long. Every large firm that has openings has lots and lots of people that are willing to try to hire them. And that's all there is. That you do what you can, and you take the jobs you can get, and then you move up from there. There's nothing wrong with starting at a smaller firm that will hire you because your grades aren't the greatest, and moving to a better firm. I meet people all the time. I meet people all the time that started off at a 4 or 5 firm, and then it's common. And people will fail the bar exam 2, 3, 4 times and think their career's over. So they just go back and they start at a smaller firm after losing their job, and then they move up, and pretty soon they're top again. Or people that didn't go to the best law schools or something that, start out at a smaller firm, and then they move up and up. So it just because the only thing that the best law school and the best grades give you is an entitlement, or not an entitlement, the ability to start at these top firms. Doesn't mean you're going to stay there. Most people don't. Most people end up moving down, but very few people will move up. And that's what's so exciting, because law firms don't care about your grades after a few years. They're more excited about if you're hungry, if you want to work there, like all those sorts of things. And they love hiring. These big firms love hiring people from mid-sized firms and things. That's what they love, and they love it. It's something that I would recommend. So, for the person with a marketing business looking for attorneys, I would recommend contacting bar associations. Okay, that's just someone giving that advice to someone else. Okay, let me just see here. I'm just making sure I don't miss any question. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you, everyone, for being on this webinar. I think this information is very useful, and I hope it helped you. I would recommend that. I hope I've made it clear how serious this is. I have never in my life sat through a webinar or any presentation where someone's saying how important this is. I definitely commend everyone that was on this today, and hopefully you got a lot out of this. And then I'll be back next week. And if you have any questions that you think of in the interim, and we can ask them next week and go from there. Thank you, everyone, for being on this webinar, and I definitely appreciate the questions and so forth. So have a great week.